Alright, welcome to my Path of Radiance and Maniac mode tier list. So, yes, this will be specifically Maniac mode, Japanese Maniac mode, and it's actually going to be tailored for Iron Man, so if you're just playing through it on emulator, this might not feel accurate, but if you're playing an Iron Man, strict Iron Man, then yeah, this will be a tier list that'll be pretty helpful in figuring out who to invest in. I've played Maniac mode a lot, and I just finished a Deathless Iron Man of it, so I'm pretty knowledgeable about, what works and what doesn't work in this game mode, although I don't know everything, and there's a few strategies I'll talk about that are more hypothetical that will still influence my tier list, because I do have some biases based on what's worked for me, so I try to be objective on these things. So yeah, there's a lot of things that go into what makes a unit good. We'll talk about all that stuff, like availability is obvious, investment cost is obvious. Opportunity cost is one I'll talk about a lot, because there's a lot of units that are good on paper, that will be good for your team in general, but you lose out on something else by using them. So, and again, we'll get into all these things for each unit. So anyways, without further ado, let's get started. First unit we'll talk about is going to be Rolf. So we'll start, by the way, we're going to be going from worst to best. So we're going to start with the F tier. So Rolf, I'll say, is probably the worst unit in the game, just because you can't really make him work in Maniac mode, because you just have to sacrifice way too much. Again, the opportunity cost is just way too great. You get him Chapter 9, starts at level 1, and he's in one of the worst classes in the game, if not the worst class in the game, an Archer Sniper. In a game that is like 90% enemy phase. Like, most of the game you're not even playing, you're just watching the results of your decisions on your turn. Like, that's the game. So Rolf, being a player phase unit, he can't attack back at enemy phase unless it's 2 range, 3 range, 4 range, I guess, is not good. But on top of that, like, you have to invest so many kills, so much bonus XP in order to get him going, just for a unit that can kill things on like once per turn. So it's not worth it. Like, if you want to make him work, yeah, again, like, think about the units that you have to be sacrificing. You have to be sacrificing, a Kieran, a Jill. Like, there's some big unit you're going to be losing out on by investing in Rolf, and it's just not worth it. Like, unless you're boss grinding or something, then you can have fun with him. But yeah. So he's a pretty easy one. He does have a few, I'll talk about his strengths and weaknesses as well. Like, he does have a few good supports. Like, he has a good support with Tauroneo. Forget the affinities. Should probably have those listed here, but whatever. He has a decent support with Tauroneo and Shinon, but like, that can make him a decent dodge tank. But it isn't enough to offset his bad class and the resource cost of investing in him. So, yep, not a great unit. Ulki is the next one I have on here. Where is he? Here he is. Okay. Ulki. So, yeah, it's like, I don't know how you can make this unit work. So he has he's less availability than Rolf, because you get him Chapter 19. So you get him, around mid-game. Get him along with Janaff and Racing, and he has so many weaknesses. First off, he's weak to wind, he's weak to bows, he's weak to Laguz Slayers, and on top of that, he's a Laguz, so he's a transformation gauge. So, and he doesn't even start off transformed like Janaff or Levy. So he has so many things going against him. Like, he gets killed so easily. He has terrible speed and luck. So it kind of does nothing for a team besides get attacked and dodge more than he should, because he has this skill called Vigilance, which adds plus 20 avoid. That would be pretty good if it wasn't just offsetting his terrible speed and luck, which leads to low avoid in the first place. There's only one use of Ulki where he'll actually get deployed, is if maybe your Janaff dies and you need to use Ulki to talk to Naesala on Chapter 19. Also, did I say you get him on Chapter 19? You get Ulki on Chapter 18. Anyways, yeah, on Chapter 19 you can use him or Janaff to talk to Naesala to save your team from Naesala and get the Night Ring. So you get some value from that, I guess, but obviously there's no reason to use him over Janaff. Janaff is just, Ulki is going to be in danger of dying if you use him to get Naesala, because there's all those snipers, or the ballistas, there's the wyverns, and Janaff is just better at dealing with them. And Janaff starts off transformed, where Ulki doesn't. So both need the full guard for that maneuver, but either way, Ulki is just strictly worse, and he's not a good combat unit, he's not a utility unit, he's just I don't know if he has any good supports. Doesn't really matter. He is just sort of one of the worst units in the game. Potentially, I think he's worse than Rolf in hard mode, because at least Rolf in hard mode, you know, can scale to be a pretty monstrous player phase unit. And, you know, there's a lot of, you know, wyverns that Rolf will just one-shot, but Ulki kind of has no use. So there's debate if Ulki's the worst thing in the game, but again, I think Rolf in Maniac mode it might be worse, because there's literally no way you can deploy him unless you boss grind or something, so yeah. So that's why I think Ulki, second worst unit in the game. Next unit will be maybe a little controversial because it's low, but I think he's slow, is Devdan. So his only value comes from daybreaks. I think he, you know, usually gets deployed by like the fourth part, you know, you end up like reinforcing with him, but he has no growth potential. Like you get him promoted as a halberdier on chapter 16. So, you know, that's not bad. And his availability isn't terrible, but he has literally zero growth potential because he has terrible stats across the board at max level, with his best stat being like just fine strength. But like I said, he's a good candidate for your last tier reinforcement slots and daybreaks, but he'll kind of just be there to maybe like bonk a cavalier or paladin that was reinforced from the northeast. That's legit like his only realistic use. And so at least it doesn't trick you into investing in him, which I'm not going to really factor that in, but like, you know, a unit like Rolf might trick you into leveling him up to thinking that he'll scale and become a monster. Devdan doesn't really trick you like that. You know he's going to be pretty bad and he's going to be on your bench the entire game. But yeah, like he, you know, you'd think that he'd have some utility as a pre-promote unit, but he just doesn't. Like when I think about it, so chapter 16, you aren't really going to use him because that's when you get to recruit him. Chapter 17, again, daybreaks, he's still not good. And then chapter 18, by chapter 18, he's actually just bad. So, and then by then, and further from there, he will never scale to be a good late game unit. So, yeah, he's just kind of a useless unit. But again, better than Rolf and Ulki because at least he has some utility in being deployed. Chapter 17 as a reinforcement, and he can help with the Northeast Paladin and Cavaliers. So, okay. Next unit. Again, I should be looking for these units. Oh, there they are. So, Mia. So, I don't think this is controversial, by the way, but there is a controversial take about sword masters I have in this game because, I mean, spoiler alert, there's a sword master in this game that I think isn't bad. It's actually pretty good. So, we'll talk about him later. But there's a few problems with Mia, is that she doesn't have any good support partners. So I haven't really discussed this. Maybe it's a good time to discuss it now before I get into the other units. Is supports matter a lot in Maniac mode. They matter a whole lot in Maniac mode. Specifically supports that add a void, because you're not going to be able to tank everything in this game, but you can dodge tank everything in this game. So notably, Ike Oscar support plus 30, you know, that sort of breaks the game to hit like a threshold where you're now dodging every enemy unit in the entire game. So supports matter a lot. So having good support partners that have good affinities like Earth Affinity, Wind Affinity, Thunder, like that stuff matters. Problem Mia is she doesn't have any good supports, and she has low strength, and she's squishy. So like she kind of has no potential to do anything. I mean, I guess you can get like a Blessed Mia, and maybe she can kill some things, but yeah, she's not going to dodge tank. She's not going to be tanky in general. She's not going to be able to kill things, and she can't enable others to do the same. So, or to be able to be good. So she has really no use, and you do have to invest in her as well. She does have good availability. She does come with a Vantage Scroll at least. So there's a few things she has going for her. Like she'll have some utility. The early chapters, well, pretty much the chapter you get her, and then chapter after you get her, like she'll have some utility, but other than that, she never really feels like a good unit, even when you first get her. She requires investment for a unit that does, like, no damage. And even Zihark, who is stronger and tankier than her, sometimes requires you to save energy drops for him. So the fact that, you know, the better version of her still requires investment from time to time is a testament to how bad Mia is. So, yeah. Mia is going to be F tier here. Is that the last F tier unit I have on this? No, there's a few more. So, yeah. Alright, I'm going to take a quick break for a second. Okay, I took a quick break just to pull up the support list, just so I can be able to reference them a little bit better. So, next thing we're going to be talking about is Lucia. So, let's bring her up, and she is still F tier. And, you know, it's difficult to say Lucia versus Mia, because at least Lucia, she'll have some, I mean, Mia has some use in the first chapter getter as well, and better availability, but availability doesn't really matter if she's a worthless unit. But Lucia does, you know, she doesn't really do anything on the chapter you get her. You get her in chapter 24, Battle Reunion. You get her along with Bastian. And yeah, she doesn't really do damage to anything. I mean, I guess like if she's fighting some warriors or berserkers, she can do some stuff. But, you know, her stats just aren't good enough. The thing that she does have going for her, though, is she does have an Earth support, Earth Affinity support. So with that Earth Affinity support, she has 2 support partners. She has Janaff and Bastian. She does have Ileana too, but you know we're talking about sort of the cases where it actually is good enough to hit a dodge tanking threshold. So she has an Earth support with a Wind support with Bastian and a Thunder support Janaff. So that'll be like I think 22.5 avoid for her. So you know that's not too bad. But the only problem is that any combination isn't like really reliable. Bastian's still too squishy for them to be dodge tanking together. Janaff is still Laguz with the, you know, weaknesses that come with being Laguz. And Lucia is still weak and squishy. So, you know, even if you use her, you don't have to invest in her at least, but even if you use her for dodge tanking, you have to use those other units with her. You still have to deploy them every single map to build up the supports. So it's really just not realistic. So I do think it's still a niche use that no one talks about though. Like, if you're doing an Iron Man and a lot of units are dying and you need some way to survive endgame, I do think it's something you can do. You know, like Lucia, Janaff, you know, put to the left or right side of endgame and just hold for as long as possible by dodge tanking. It can work. It can actually help you. But yeah, it's, again, not really something I've ever done. It's just hypothetical. And it's not enough to bring her up to E tier, I don't think. But yeah, so she's weak, squishy, and she has no value other than like the Silver Sword and Laguz guards that she comes with, which, you know what, like those do matter. I do think like, you know, units that come with weapons, it's better than not coming with weapons or not coming with items, you know. Like I don't know how I factor that into her or like how good she is. For example, Stefan comes with a Vague Caudy. Does that factor into how good he is? It's hard to say. But at least for Lucia, this case, it's not enough to do anything more than keep her in F tier. So, yep, she's gonna be an F tier. And we have one more F tier unit here. Kind of a controversial one, I think, because I mean, I really like this unit too, but you know, she's just not good in Maniac mode. It's gonna be Nephenee. So Nephenee, she has a Wind support affinity, which is whatever because she doesn't have any good support partners. She is pretty weak and mediocre across the board with all of her stats. She's not a unit that will scale into late game. She comes at a decent chapter. She has decent availability. You get her chapter, well, I guess 11 technically. And she does fine for a few chapters. Just like fine. She's not like a crazy liability, but she will die to like most Laguz. And, you know, she's not someone you can keep out in the open. But she doesn't grow into anything good. You know, even if you get her to Halberdier early, her growths are just not good enough. She's too squishy for the class she is. She's not strong enough. She's not fast enough. Actually, I think her speed's okay, but I digress. Like, she's just not, again, similar, you know, Fire Emblem has this issue, or maybe it doesn't anymore. I haven't played too many of the newer Fire Emblems, but at least the older ones, like a lot of the woman units, especially if they're in classes like, you know, like a halberdier or soldier, like they naturally make them squishier and weaker, which is like makes them worse units, you know. Like it makes them, maybe they'll make them faster, but like yeah, in general, for a class like this, it's not good to be a female in Fire Emblem, you know. She's just not gonna be able to kill too many things, and she's gonna get killed by a lot of things. And so the investment cost is just too great to use her. I actually have tried Nephenee out in Maniac mode, and it just does not work. It does not work at all. So I do think like if you were to use Nephenee and Braum together as supports, like what would you get? You get what is it, just 7.5 avoid and some other thing. Like, it's just not great. Like, it doesn't really do much for you. There are way better, like, place to invest. Like, you could argue that she might be the bottom of E tier, but again, if you invest in her, you are sabotaging your team. She's not going to do work for your team. Yeah, she's will just trick you into investing in her, and you'll regret it later. So, okay, that's it for F tier though. So now we're moving on to the E tier units. Okay, the first unit of the E tier is Tormod. So, by the way, I should have mentioned this at the very beginning of this video, which is that we are not including the crit glitched forged thunder tomes or slim weapons. We're not, like, if we're factoring that in, like, all the sages become S tier, A tier, like every single one. They're just too broken. They're way too broken. Like, you basically the game's just easier than hard mode and maniac mode if you use those things. I have like a video which I might link of me using Soren on Clash, just solo Clash. It's so stupid. You give them Vantage. Actually, you don't need to give them Adept, but give them Vantage. That's all they need with like 4 quick glitch Thunder Tomes, and then every sage just solos the game for you. So we're not counting for that, and we're also not counting for any boss grinding or anything like that. So it's very ethical hoops here for how we're talking about this tier list. So that's why Tormod is still E tier. You get him way too late for most teams to function investing in him. So, it is possible. Like, it is possible to invest in him and for him to do work for your team. Whereas with Nephenee, Mia, Devdan, like all the F tier is not the case. If you do invest in Tormod, you will get someone that's good. Really good, actually, maybe. Because, he still has utility. And he has like this really cool skill where he gets more movement. Although I guess for his class, it's not really, doesn't really matter, to be a sage with an extra movement or 2. So yeah, if he's ramped up, he'll still be, I don't know if he's as good as Soren, because his stats, like, the job of the sage in Path of Radiance is to guaranteed hit things, to have high skill and high magic, and to heal well. Like, that's the job of the sage. You're not going to have any combat unit sages in an enemy phase game. So he still doesn't do his job as well as Soren. Like, he'll be, tankier, I guess, but again, it doesn't matter because neither of them seen combat like that. And Soren will be better at, like, using like siege tomes to sort of skip a chapter or kill a boss. So even if you invest in him, even if ramped up, he's still just not as good as like a Soren, or I don't know. He's probably on par with Ileana for that job, but he's like a weird hybrid between like a combat sage and a traditional utility sage. Like, he just doesn't really work in maniac mode if you're going to be investing in him. He's just fine. So yeah, he's E tier. I should probably emphasize it more that you get him on chapter, I want to say 15, right? You get him beginning of chapter 16. Yeah, you have chapter 16. His availability is too low. He comes at like level 7, so that's why he's this low. His availability is too low. You have to invest in him. The opportunity cost of investing in him will take away from your team overall, and it's just not worth it. So, okay, the next one is probably a little controversial to be over Tormod. I never thought he was in this tier until recently, after doing some looking into support combinations and different, like, just making this tier list. I was looking at pretty much every single angle a unit could be used, and Ranulf ends up being a little better than I thought. So, obviously the problem with Ranulf is that his availability is really bad. You get him chapter 23, right? So you don't get him for too long. He's a Laguz, which means he's inherently bad for the Laguz reasons. And his stats aren't that amazing. He's weak to fire magic. And he doesn't have like the benefit of carrying a weak real mercenaries team like Levy and Mordecai do. He's just kind of there for no reason. You don't really need him. But he does have decent speed. He can attack. He's not like a super big liability. He's just mediocre all around. And all that being said, he'd probably end up below Tormod. Because at least Tormod, has potential to be a pretty good magic user that can physics staff and, Thunder Tomes or Siege Tome enemies, right? Like, the opportunity cost, though, is like, you don't use Soren or Ileana in that case, but still, I'd still put Tormod above Ranulf. However, there's one reason why I think Ranulf might go above Tormod, is his Ike support. So, Ranulf has a wind affinity and Ike has an earth affinity. So that means that together, if they get an A rank support, that'll be plus 22 avoid, which will average out, I did, write this down already. It'll average out to be 85.45 dodge on Ranulf and 97.8 on Ike, which is really good. That's enough to start dodge tanking a lot of chapters. And if Ranulf wasn't a Laguz, I could see it being like a viable strategy of like, you could do Ike, Ranulf, Oscar, Kieran, which I'll talk about Oscar, Kieran later, because it's a very interesting thing, because if you do Oscar, Kieran, you're losing on Ike or Ike Oscar, but whatever. But the problem is, he's still Laguz, and the opportunity cost of using him is still not worth it because of that. Like, I could see it working if you have a full guard, a demi-band, you've got a bunch of Laguz stones from chapter 15 that you're using. Like, there are different ways to make it work, but it's just not really worth it. I've tried to make Laguz work with Muarim, and it's very difficult, especially, again, Maniac mode. So, yeah, he does have some potential for late game to be a dodge tank with Ike. It does open up some other possibilities because you don't have to invest in Ranulf. So if you do go that route with Ike, Ranulf, and you somehow make it work, then that means that you could invest in some other units. Your Ike, your Oscar Kieran's really good. Now you maybe have an extra slot for a Jill or a Marcia. Who knows? Like, there are different things that opens up that possibility, but I haven't done it. I don't know if it really works. It's just a hypothetical, but it's enough to push him up at least over the F tier. So that's Ranulf. Okay, the next unit E tier is going to be Largo, which, he could be a few below this. Honestly, I do think Tormod could be a little higher than I'm putting him here, but I have to use him to find that out. But either way, Largo is a pretty interesting unit. You get him very late. You get him chapter 25. He's not really a great class for Maniac mode because Berserkers are very squishy. But it is nice to have a unit that can kill things or do damage because, yeah, a lot of units in this game can't do damage on Maniac mode. The enemies are just too strong. So he can at least do some damage. He's okay filler if you need some filler units for like Clash and Endgame. But overall, he just doesn't really do much for your team. The only reason why he's not F tier, though, is because, for one, his stats aren't that bad. Like, he will do damage. He will survive rounds of combat. So he will, get some hits in. And he does have decent support with, like, some other fill units like Tauroneo or Muarim. So, I was thinking about this, like, on Endgame or Clash, there are some strategy you can use in those chapters. One of which is, like, sort of making a huge wall of units and trying to, like, split the aggro across your entire team, which is not, I guess, the most effective thing. But because you can get a support with Largo and Tauroneo basically in one chapter, they get, I think it's plus 5 avoid, which isn't amazing, but it's still good enough to be like, okay, this is filler. These are filler units that can work in this strategy. And same for endgame. So, he can pitch in, and you don't have to invest in him. So that's good enough to be above F tier for me. You're never going to trick yourself into sabotaging your team with Largo. That's a bonus. And he's never going to take away from your team. He'll just, like, maybe die on his own and take out some units with him. So, he's not that bad. Well, he is bad. He's E tier, but he's not as bad as, like, a Mia or a Rolf, right? So, not much to say about Largo, but because of his availability, but his lack of investment, and some niche uses for him, like, I'll put him... Niche uses on the Haar's maps, I'll put him in E tier for now, so... Okay, next unit's going to be Ina. So, Ina is not a great unit, obviously. She's worse than Nasir, which, that's something, but you do get one or the other. So it's not like if you have Ina, you're just not going to use her. If you have Ina, you're going to use her, because you don't have Nasir to replace her. She'll start level 1, and I think she might have better growth than Nasir. I think, like, if she technically get into both level 20, Ina might be as good or better, but whatever. You get her level 1, you only have her for 2 chapters. So, and she's just not that great on those 2 chapters. However, you can level her up on Twisted Tower, and on Endgame, there is a way to use Nasir and Ina that's actually very effective. There's some of the best users of Wrath Resolve. Again, if you're doing an Iron Man, and not a Deathless Iron Man, I'll say you're doing an Iron Man, I think this is a great strategy for Iron Mans, is get, your Ina or Nasir, put Wrath Resolve on them, send them to that right side, the really scary side of Endgame, and let them just do whatever happens, happens. They're going to take out so many units with them, because they have so much HP, and they're going to get down to below half health, and they're just going to kill a bunch of stuff. Nasir's obviously better at this, but Ina, you know, she's also good at it. Like, they're not going to be that different because it's Wrath Resolve, so they're going to be critting everything. So and that's one way of using her, and you might say, why don't you just put on other units? Well, again, she does that better than your other units. And if you have a unit that's good at doing that, and in that case, you probably don't want to put Wrath Resolve on them because they don't want them to die, because they actually are been invested in. So if you have like a, you know, a 60 HP Boyd or something, I guess it's still pretty good though, but it's still pretty good. It's just rare to have a 6 HP Boyd endgame. Like, well, I'll talk about Boyd later, but yeah, either way, there's no investment cost for this strategy with Ina and Nasir, so it's a decent use, and being like a valuable asset in endgame. Okay, I should have brought this up earlier as well. I don't value every chapter equally. I don't value endgame as like, oh, that's one chapter, and chapter 1 is, oh, that's one chapter, so they're equivalent in value. So Ina being valuable for endgame in a niche case isn't equal to being valuable in chapter, you know, 1 or 2 for a niche case. It just isn't. You know, and it's because, like, intuitively it makes sense. You know, when you have to reverse engineer these things, it becomes sort of maddening because it's just so obvious and common sense. But then when you're being very strict and logical, then you're like, oh, it's just one chapter, one chapter. Endgame is like 3 hours long on average. You know, chapter 1 or prologue, right, is like, what, 10 minutes, 15 minutes? So, you know, by that logic, it's like 18 times longer. You know, it's like 18 times as important. And then the other hand is that, like a chapter like Endgame or Clash, if you have a team that struggles with it, or you're not using strategies that work with it, you can get soft locked and waste days trying to get through it if you're a kid. You know, if you're an adult, you're probably going to be able to get through it just fine after a few hours. But, you know, like, I imagine my child self coming back to play Path of Radiance and, you know, using the wrong units and getting soft locked on Endgame. You know, like, wow, this sucks. If only I had a better tier list that didn't rate units that were good in early game better than units that scale, you know? So I do value harder chapters and longer chapters higher than easier chapters and shorter chapters. I just do. You know, they're all part of the same continuous stream of the gameplay. I don't care that they're technically separated by chapters. They're not equal. They're just sections within an overarching game. You know, they're all part of the same stream of gameplay. Does that make sense? Hopefully it makes sense. So endgame being 3 hours long is more important. It's like, it's equivalent to being good in like 5 chapters for me, you know? It, like, hopefully it makes sense. But anyways, so Ina being a decent asset endgame that you'll definitely deploy and has a pretty good niche use case, makes her at least E tier for me. So, okay. Okay, next up is Bastian. So Bastian is a very interesting unit. Again, you get him chapter 24 with Lucia, so pretty bad availability. But he's better than Lucia in that chapter because he's actually very good at killing the Wyvern reinforcements that come. And he can also use siege tomes. So those two things already make him definitely better than Lucia, you know, and pretty decent asset to have. And you will get use out of him because he is force deployed, and he will be used to kill some wyverns, or at least do some damage with his wind tome, or his Elwind. However, he has no staff utility. So that's, if Bastian had like staff utility, oh my god, he'd be so awesome. It'd be so great to have a unit like that. But, you know, alas, he comes with a stiletto and knife, the ability to use knives. So, but again, he produces a positive value in the chapter he's force deployed in. But other than that, you know, bad availability, no staff utility makes him pretty bad. But again, he's above the other units because of his siege tome uses. So I haven't really talked about, I'm just kind of saving it for, you know, the higher rated sages, but siege tomes are pretty important in this game. So, you know, you can use siege tomes with Bastian on the next chapter. You can use like the Blizzard on the boss. You can use it, well, you're probably not going to use it too much on Clash, but you could. Chapter 27, it's good at stopping the thieves that are rushing to get the chests. And then you can use it on chapter or an endgame to attack dragons, I guess. I don't know if you can use Thunder Tomes though, bolting like out of the box. I'm not sure. But Sage utility is just really nice, even without the staves. So there's that. So because of that, he's still E tier, but not much more than that because of his bad availability and yada yada yada. So all right, okay. Actually, I made a little mistake. I actually had Sothe below Bastian originally, but I think it's fine to have him above him. I'm just going to keep it here for consistency's sake. So, because it really is not a big difference to me. So Sothe, purely utility unit. So if you don't know, he can't promote. He has a skill called Blossom, though, that makes him that, you know, he will be a pretty solid level 20 thief for a level 20 thief, because he'll grow pretty, like, he gets pretty good, like, stats, right? Is that how it works? I think it takes longer for him to level up, but he gets more stats, like better gross. Anyways, it doesn't really matter, because you're not going to use him for combat anyways. He's purely a secondary thief that will likely only see the map, like one map to steal chests from, but at least doesn't charge you for his services, so that's the benefit of Sothe over Volke. And the truth is, it's not that hard to keep your thieves safe in this game. There are a few chapters you have to watch over the siege tomes, of course, but if Volke is getting attacked by siege tomes, he's probably dying too. So, you know, it's not like you're choosing one or the other isn't really a big deal, but you do save money with Sothe, which is something. You can recruit Devdan, which is whatever. I do factor those things in, though, by the way. Like, being able to recruit things like that. Like, it's better than... The idea is if it's better than not being able to do it, then it's something, right? It is something. But it's such a minuscule detail, it doesn't really matter. But, yeah, money... The thing is, I do still think he's top of E tier because the fact doesn't charge you for stealing. And honestly, if I'm brave enough, I probably use Sothe over Volke from now on. Because, again, Volke is not seeing any combat, like, in this game. You're not investing in him. He's not doing damage. He has that one ability that you're not giving him a Cult Scroll to do his, you know, his one-hit kill. So you probably want to use Sothe, actually. It's just, again, it's like, oh, Volke, maybe you could take one hit. But the fact of the matter is that even though money is pretty abundant in this game, if you're doing Maniac mode, especially if you're doing an Iron Man, you want to be forging every map, you want to be spending your money, and by endgame, you will sort of be a little bit broke, or close to broke. It's not like Sacred Stones. Sacred Stones, you have way too much money. This game, it's pretty close by the end of it if you're doing Maniac mode, and you're really spending it. So the fact that Sothe doesn't charge you is something. It's not nothing. And I do think that, you know, I'm still putting him below Volke, of course, because I do think it's important that, you know, Volke can take a hit, which is nice, which never really occurs, but is nice, and it's enough to put him above Sothe. I do think that maybe the future of this game, if, you know, the future meta, which doesn't really exist, but whatever, Sothe might be the primary thief. I do think so. And his availability is pretty good. You get him chapter 13 or 12? Maybe in 12. I think you have chapter 12. So that's pretty decent availability as well. So, all right, that's Sothe. Okay, so that's it for E tier. Let's move on to the bottom of D tier. And there I'm going to put all three Laguz Royals in this order. So Giffca the best, Tibarn second best, Naesala worst. But honestly, they all do the same thing. They all get the job done. You know, the purpose of them is that you don't get checkmated by Ashnard, I guess you can say. You know, if Ashnard, you're not able to get an Ether proc, you run out of physics staff usage, and, you know, he's just going crazy in your team. These guys basically, you know, get you out of that situation. They kind of guarantee that you're able to kill Ashnard because they do a lot of damage, and they come with elixirs. So they all do that job effectively, although Giffca is the best. He has 15 damage. I think Tibarn does 10, and Naesala does like 9. They just have some abilities that are not really relevant here. And I put it on D tier because, again, we're talking about the hardest chapter in the game and the hardest boss in the game. I guess you can say Black Knight might be harder, because Black Knight, you can pretty easily just not beat him. Like, it's really random. Ashnard, you'll definitely be able to beat if you prepare. So, you know, but hardest chapter in the game, and I guess would be the hardest boss. No, you get stabs there, so I think Black Knight's still harder. But, you know, I think it's very valuable to be able to have a Laguz Royal to help you in endgame. It's really nice. And I think it's better than what the E-tier units do. The only exception being, like, I think Sothe could move up in a future tier list if I make another one. Probably just Sothe, though. Like, yeah, probably just Sothe. Other than that, though, yeah, I think these guys belong here. Because, again, just the most valuable situation to have 3 God tier units. But, again, availability is so low that you only get them for a little bit, so whatever. They can't go any higher than this. But, alright. So, after Tibarn, Giffca, and Naesala, we have Janaff. So, he's better in, like, pretty much every way than Ulki. but shares the same weaknesses overall, except the fact that he starts transformed, which is nice. The best thing about Janaff is that he helps you with the Night Rain pretty easily, preventing Naesala from like wreaking havoc on your team. He's not a terrible unit though. Like his combat's pretty good if you're actually using him, but again, being a flying Laguz is super tough. Super tough. You know, it's probably the worst Laguz type to have as a player, right? Like I don't think. I mean, it's only tigers, cats, and flyers and birds, right? So yeah, definitely the worst. He does have a support with Oscar, right? Let me check. I did have to check this. Yeah, he has amazing supports. So Janaff is kind of similar, a similar boat to Ranulf. Don't want to curse on this. Similar to Ranulf in that he has like an amazing support, which could be looked into in the future. He actually has a few amazing supports. So he's the Thunder type support, which is probably the second best, right? It's better than Wind in my opinion. And he has a support with Oscar, who's of Earth Affinity. He has support with Lucia of Earth Affinity. He has support with Shinon of Thunder Affinity. So, you know, there is some world where you find some way to use them with Lucia or Oscar. I do have the stats here. So if you use them, if you pair him with Oscar, which is going to be 22 plus 0.5 avoid, that gives Oscar 88.7 avoid, Janaff 92.9 avoid. On average, at like level 20 promoted. So that threshold, they can both survive near each, like within 3 spaces of each other in most situations, especially considering Oscar's soul and Janaff will have the more higher avoid. But Janaff would need full guard in that case, Debiman Lagusto, just like Ranulf. He's also a little weak, so it's hard for him to kill things sometimes. And again, like when we talk about these hypothetical pairs, what's the opportunity cost? If you use Janaff Oscar, you know, which, yeah, it's going to be actually pretty good, you lose out on Ike Oscar, which is way better, which we'll get into the Ike Oscar support when we get up to the higher tiers, but you lose out on the best pairing in the entire game. So, you know, same thing, same reasoning goes with Ranulf. Like, why would you do Ike Ranulf when you can do Ike Oscar support? Like, it's just, you're just, you know, losing out on value. And you can't do both. So, yeah, and again, you know, the reason he's D tier is because he gives you the full guard. Like, that is really nice. If he didn't give you the full guard, he'd probably be E tier. Because, again, you're not going to really want to use him in combat in most cases. Because so many ballistas and wind magic. But the full guard is just so nice to put on Ike. Like, just so... Or if you don't like Ike for some reason, maybe you're doing a different type of strategy or using, like, Kieran Oscar and Ike is on his own, put it on Reason. You know, the full guard is just amazing. Just so good. So anyways, that's Janaff. Let's move on. Next we have Elincia. So Elincia is not a bad kind of unit to get late game, but also not necessary either. You know, like most runs, maybe not most, like half the runs I use her, half I don't. Lately though, I usually use her for sure in a few chapters. She kind of has like 0 chance for combat in Maniac mode, like, she can survive a round or 2, though. She's not a liability as a healer because of her Canto and Mount, so she can easily evade while doing her healing. But honestly, she's pretty much only useful in endgame to, like, Hammern or Asher Staff, or, like, Hammern the Asher Staff or Hammern the Bolting. Like, she's probably your better Hammern user because you usually want your, you know, your Sages and your Mist to have some other staffs on them rather than the Hammern. So it's nice to have like your, I guess, your 3rd string healer in Elincia without any investment. So that's pretty nice. However, she does have one downside, which is her force deployment in Clash. She kind of has no business being in Clash. Like, Clash is a weird chapter where you kind of just want your Ike and Oscar or whoever your pairing is to just kind of solo the map for you. I mean, there's different strategies, of course. Like, I'm just talking about the most consistent strategy, which is like have your duo kind of just take over the map. And Clash is like, Elincia doesn't really have any impact. And if you're playing it in any other way where it's chaotic, then Elincia is just a liability because, you know, in an Iron Man situation, you actually lose, game over if you lose Elincia. So, you know, she kind of has no business being in Clash. So that's her only downside. She actually does kind of feel like a liability there. I've seen people lose Iron Mans because of her. Still, I think in the hands of like a good player, someone who knows what they're doing in Maniac mode, she's just a net positive, requires no investment. She's a really nice unit to have in the game, but her availability, you only have her for, 1, 2, 3, 4 chapters, right? Like, it just, it's not good enough. It's not really gonna make her any... I don't think she can be in C tier because of that. Yeah, she's just a nice utility to have. So, D tier she goes. Next in D tier is going to be Nasir. So very similar to Ina. Low availability, only 2 chapters. But, he starts out, like, I think level 10 versus Ina's level 1. And again, Wrath Resolve, Demiband, Lagoon Stones, whatever. He will really wreak havoc in endgame for you. Like, he will do so much work on the right side if you want him to. But the thing is, the reason he's better than Ina, a whole tier above her, you don't have to do that with him. You don't have to sacrifice him, basically. You can kind of just use him normally, and he'll be pretty damn good. Yeah, like you don't need him to be low health to do work for you. He'll be able to double things, take a lot of damage, right? Like that's really nice to have. So, no investment needed. He's just gonna do really well in the last 2 chapters. Low availability though means that he's still D tier, but yeah, he's a pretty solid unit to have. Pure net positive. There's no downside to Nasir. So, yep, he's just, and he could be. I mean, no, he's D tier. The availability still keeps him D tier. Okay, we have one last unit in D tier, and that's gonna be Tauroneo. So Tauroneo, he's definitely a weird unit to rank because you get him. You feel like you get him really late, but you actually get him a level or chapter 21. And even though it's like, oh, that's late game, it doesn't really feel like late game because the later chapters are longer. So chapter 21 kind of feels like mid game. So you don't get him that late. His availability is okay. And he comes pre-promoted. I think he comes not level 14, right? He comes pretty high level though, for a general. And his stats are decent. His growths aren't obviously very good, but his stats are fine. So he's pretty mediocre filler and an okay class for Maniac mode, because Maniac mode, you want to be able to survive enemy phase, but he's still not tanky or good enough to really survive enemy phase on his own. Like, he's still just a filler unit. However, he comes with Resolve and amazing weapon ranks. I think that his weapon ranks are sort of his best ability, like utility, is that he can use like a silver blade, he can use spears, he can do, and he kind of fits into a lot of deployments. Like, you'll be surprised how often you end up using Tauroneo in certain situations. And again, he's just a pure net positive, just like Nasir. Like, you're never going to feel bad using Tauroneo. And he does have some niche things. Like, again, he does have that support with Largo. So, you have 2 filler units that together become a slightly better mediocre unit, like slightly less mediocre. And he's really good for, filling in walls if you're making walls in your, like, endgame, he's okay. And he has that same utility as Nasir Ina, where you can kind of just use him as a bomb that you just place on the right side with, put Wrath on him, Wrath Resolve, and he has high enough HP where he's going to actually do work for you. Not as much work as Nasir or Ina, but maybe he has as much work as Ina. I don't know. But, he's decent for, like, he has a lot of things going for him, a lot of small things going for him, enough to put him into D tier. Not higher than that, though, because, again, he's not really self-sufficient as a combat unit. He's just a filler unit, but probably the best. Nah, not the best filler. I think the next unit might be the best filler, but we'll go over it. So, okay, and that's it for D tier. So let's move on to C tier. So the first unit of C tier is going to be Calill. And by the way, I take it back. I do think Tauroneo is probably the best pure filler unit, because the other units, everything above this, I don't know if I'd count as pure filler. But yeah, anyways, Calill, she is pretty... I mean, she is still kind of mediocre as a unit in this game, but she's C tier for an amazing reason. So she's mediocre because she doesn't use staves. She has knives just like Bastian, but you get her... you don't get her early. You're like chapter 20, right? But she comes with Meteor, which is nice. Her stats aren't bad at all, honestly. I think her stats are pretty decent. And she doesn't require any investment whatsoever. Now, again, the reason why she's C tier, I've already kind of said it, is that she has Meteor and that she can use Siege Tomes out of the box. Having a Siege Tome user out of the box brings her up for me, and you get her early enough where you actually get the siege tomes for all the important chapters. The important chapters being chapter 21, 22, 25, 27, and endgame. And there's no rule you can't only use one sage. So like on those chapters we need siege tomes, sure, you'll have like your main sage being either Soren or Ileana, probably Soren, but you know, there's no reason not to use Calill, and usually you want Calill because she'll get kind of be an insurance policy. And actually in some of the chapters you want multiple siege tome users. I might as well just go over that now. Like chapter 21, there's a thief you want to kill to get a brave sword. Chapter 22, you want to skip the chapter by killing the boss early. So you want to, you know, use Rayson, Soren, and Calill. Chapter 25, you want to kill the boss as soon as possible. You're going to probably need multiple siege tome users to guarantee that happens. 27, you want to kill the thieves as well as they don't open the doors, the chests. In endgame, you're probably going to use Calill for this, but you do want to use siege tomes on the dragons if possible with the bolting, like, you know, and hammering the bolting. That's sort of a pretty nice strategy to have to make your life a lot easier when you're trying to, you know, boss rush up to Ashnard. So there. And Calill, again, that's why siege tomes are pretty valuable. That's why it brings her up all the way to C tier. If siege tomes weren't so valuable, she'd probably be E tier, but just because of siege tomes, I put her at C tier, and just because you get her before all the important siege tome chapters. Okay, that's Calill. Next one's going to be Volke. So, yeah, Volke is, you know, Thief utility is always kind of hard to rank. But the reason... Okay, I just remember why... I'm not sure how stealing... Is stealing based on speed and Path of Radiance? Path of Radiance stealing... I gotta check this real quick. Speed and strength stats are greater than... Okay. So this is one reason why... Maybe I shouldn't have been saying that Sothe could be brought up. Because I don't know if Sothe can steal from as many units as Volke can. And Volke can steal from a lot of units, you know, even without investment. So that's another reason why I guess Volke is better than Sothe. I probably should have remembered that before I started talking about how Sothe could be brought up. So I kind of take that back. Because the main reason Volke is in C tier is because there's so many physics staffs you can steal in this game. So many. To the point, like, so different than like than Sacred Stones or other games like that. Like you'll have physics staffs the entire game basically if you're using Volke and Sothe correctly. The chess utility is fine, comes in handy on like maybe 3 chapters, but usually it's better not to waste a deployment slot on a Volke or a Sothe. He does promote again, unlike Sothe, and it comes automatically, but his combat will never be a factor for him. But at least he can survive a few more attacks if that ends up happening. And yeah, he is better than Sothe because of his availability, his durability, and I guess, I didn't think about this, but his ability to steal from more units, although I imagine it's not that different because you're mainly stealing from priests, and Sothe probably has more strength and speed than the priests as well. But again, he does charge you, so, you know, Sothe has that over him. So there's still an argument for Sothe to come up a little bit or Volke to come down, but I think this is mostly fine for now. So, yep, Sothe or Volke is in C tier. Oh, I will say, Volke's combat and durability does come into play on at least one chapter. Chapter 12, I'd say. Like, it is nice that he has enough speed and durability to like not get killed by the birds in one shot, whereas a lot of units will. So he can kind of help protect your squishier units like your mists and stuff. So, you know, that's one thing he's going for him. Oh, and then I guess the sand chapters, but I usually use Sothe and Volke there. Okay, let's move on. So the next unit we have in C tier is Geoffrey. So Geoffrey is a pretty interesting unit as well. You get him very late. You get him chapter 25. I mean, you know, he's on chapter 24, but you don't get him until chapter 25. And he has Paragon. He's Paragon, and he's a lance bow paladin. Does he start at level 10? I don't think he starts level 1. I think he's like level 10 or something. So he's not hard to level, but he is a filler unit. Oh, I should have maybe, I don't know. He's not pure filler like Tauroneo, because unlike Tauroneo, you can get Geoffrey to be a unit where you're actually using him actively. Maybe that's wrong though. I don't know if you have enough time for that to really be the case. It's just endgame, he ends up being pretty decent if you actually invest in him. But he sort of fills the same role as like a Jill in endgame, where he's sort of a standalone unit that's pretty tanky, can take some damage, but he probably struggles to kill things with his lower speed. However, he does have bows, so that's really nice dealing with wyverns, which in late game, wyverns are really annoying and really hard to kill, so the fact that he has bows is nice, although, again, he still might struggle to kill them because of his low speed. He's actually really easy to level with Paragon and bows, so to get him to level 20 is not really a chore. I guess, like, you do have to sort of grind him on Twisted Tower for the most part, but other than that, like, getting to level 20 is pretty realistic. His availability is obviously pretty bad. You only get him for, like, 5 chapters, but he's fine in all of them. Like, he doesn't really struggle in 25. 26, obviously, is going to be kind of a non-factor. 27, he hasn't struggled. 28, he's just grinding. In 29, or endgame, he'll actually be pretty decent if you build a wall around him. And, again, he will be pretty tanky for a paladin, so that he really does have that going for him, but he has no good supports, so he's not going to be able to dodge much, and he's going to kind of struggle to kill things as efficiently as like an Oscar or a Kieran or whatever. So, you know, I think C tier is fair for him. I don't think he goes any higher than this because of his availability, but he's a decent little unit, and I think this is where he belongs. So, okay, now we have Muarim. So Muarim's a weird one. I used to think he was much lower than this. I used to think he was kind of around Tauroneo, which just, you know, filler with slightly better availability. But there is a strategy you can use with him. He does have some hidden potential. It's just, I mean, it's just not as good as another option you have. So I'll talk about, it's a little cryptic. I'll talk about that in a second. So he has a lot of things going for him. You know, he's decent stats. He's not a bird, he's a tiger, which is better than being a bird. But he's still a goose, so he still, you know, transforms. But he does come with a demi-band, which is amazing. Like, even though stats go lower, it's definitely worth using. Only problem is, it'd be nice if you had the demi-band and the full guard at the same time to offset his other Laguz issues. So, you know, he's decent at base, he doesn't require much investment, and, you know, usually people use him as sort of a filler unit where he'll be decent chapter 17, he'll be decent on some of the other chapters that you just need a unit to take some hits, like, you know, even Clash, he'll take some hits for you. But that's not the reason why he's in C tier. The reason he's in C tier is because he's a Thunder affinity and he has the support with Zihark, who has an Earth affinity. So, you know, when they have at A support, they'll be plus 22.5 avoid, which is amazing. And it's mainly amazing because it enables Zihark to sort of become maybe tied with the best, I have to check the stats again, but maybe the best dodge tank, even better than Ike Oscar support. The only problem is, like, they have to be next to each other. And even though Zihark will be going off with this plus 22.5 avoid, Muarim will be still a Laguz that has to avoid fire, you know, has lower stats to the demi-band, right? Has to avoid Laguz weapons. So he's still a liability, and it would be worth it. And he'd probably still be B tier if it weren't for the existence of another unit, Braum. So Braum is just the better option to pair with Zihark. Even though support bonuses are worse, it's only plus 15 avoid. Braum is just less of a liability nature of his class being a, you know, knight general. So, you know, he's still strong. He still has that potential, and I have actually tried it, you know, Muarim, Zihark, and it does work. You know, you will get to endgame with them, and they will be able to survive. Like, I send them to the left-hand side. They will be able to survive that whole, all the paladins and do that job for you, which is really nice. But it's not as good as Braum, so you can't go any higher than this, you know. So, yep, that's Muarim. Okay, next up we have one of the most interesting units in the game, actually, right now, in my head. It's like there's just a lot of things going for him that I haven't really tried out, and it's Haar. So Haar, he's interesting because you get him late game, you get him chapter 23, but it's not too late where you feel like, okay, you barely get to use him. Like, you actually do get a lot of chapters with him, and, you know, the most important chapters as well with him, right? He's in one of the best classes in the game, being a Wyvern Rider, Wyvern Knight, whatever he is in this game. So really great class, great weapon ranks, comes with the Brave Axe, and pretty good bases as well. So you don't have to invest him at all. He just comes out pretty decent. Like, again, he's like kind of like Tauroneo, like really good filler, but I'd say he's even better filler. And you can only get him 2 chapters later. So the only problem though is, like, you know, on his own he's not going to scale into anything great. You know, his bases still aren't good enough. His growths aren't good enough for him to actually be a late game standalone carry, because even Jill struggles with that. Even an average Jill. Somebody's get a bad Jill, right? But like even an average Jill can struggle to be standalone. Haar struggles even harder, although I guess he's more consistent because you get him at like level 10. What level do you get him? Level 11. So he'll consistently be whatever he is. You know, it's not much variance with him. He has some, but here's the reason why. Like, he's C tier, and I think there's a lot of potential. I don't know if he can get to B tier, but I do have to try out a few strategies. So he has two great supports, two amazing supports. He has a support with Makalov and Jill. Both of them are Thunder Affinity, Haar's Wind Affinity. So what does that mean? It means that at A rank, they'll be at plus 15 of Void together. And you get, I think it's like 1, 2, 4 Jill and 1, I'd say 1, 3, 5 with Makalov. So both are relatively fast. Obviously Jill is faster, but whatever. And the reason why they're worth exploring is I think that Haar and Makalov, Haar and Jill as duos, like, I think Haar is just good enough for it to actually work. And if he can enable Jill as well, that's really nice. Because Jill has the issue of like not having a great support partner with traditional knowledge of who's good in this game. Usually people don't use Haar that much. Jill doesn't have any other good supports outside of Haar in this case. I think she has Mist, but you're not going to be combat Mist. So, if Haar can fill that spot and be a good duo with Jill, that's really nice. And now Jill becomes really good, Haar becomes fine. In a kind of a late game combat unit. And now with Makalov, Makalov is really good. Makalov has like the best bases in the game for all the paladins, all the mounted units. Makalov is kind of a late game scaling monster. Like, he's just always good. So Haar being able to pair with Makalov, and now the difference between Haar, Makalov, Haar, Jill is that Haar, Jill needs 2 full guards. You only have 1. I guess you don't need it. It's just that you have to be more careful how you use your units now, because one of them is going to be weak to wind magic and bows, which is pretty annoying. But with Makalov, at that point, now Haar definitely gets a full guard without competition, and it also doesn't means you only have to invest in, well, I guess you invest in one unit or the other, right? So I guess that's not really a factor. But that's pretty nice. So I do want to try that out, like Makalov Haar. And if you do go that Makalov Haar route, that means that you only have to, like, Makalov usually pair with Astrid if you're actually going to go the Makalov route. And it is difficult sometimes. It's like a hard strategy, but it's like really good, because Astrid and Makalov both start out pretty low level, and it's hard to invest in both of them, but you can do it. Whereas if you did Makalov Haar, now you only have to focus on Makalov. You can kind of ignore Astrid, not invest or not use her, and now you get Haar chapter 23 by the time Makalov's scaling up anyways. And now, that might just be better, because now you might have time to invest in some other units. Like, I don't know, have to think about it. Like, I guess it'd be Jill, but if you do Jill, maybe you want to support Jill and Haar. But anyways, I'll think about it. I kind of want to experiment with him. But anyways, the point is that he has some higher potential than these other C-tier units. He's someone I could see going up. So that's just his potential. The other things Haar has going for him is not that he's not just like a good filler unit for combat. Like, he has some really good openings in this game. Like, the way that certain chapters open up, like a great example is Clash. There's like that Siege Tome guy on like the right side that's out of range of most units. But if you have a Wyvern flyer like a Jill or a Haar, you can just, and Haar, you can use the Brave Axe. Then you can Brave Axe that guy and run back, right? So Haar's good for that. Chapter, like, is that the only one? I swear there's like more. He just has some utility. I guess, is that the only opener? Was I being stupid thinking that there's other openers? I think I was being stupid. But even on Clash, it's nice to have a flyer sometimes, because there is another strategy you can do on Clash, which is like, kind of migrating all your units to the top right, and then kind of taking out Sleep Staff guy systematically. And Haar is really good with that, again, because of the Brave Axe. So, his ability to reach far away places and Brave Axe them is nice. Whereas Jill, she might not be able to use the Brave Axe at that point, who knows? Or if maybe you're not using Jill. So, yeah, he has good utility, he's decent filler for combat, just like Tauroneo, and he has some much higher potential than Tauroneo. And again, he has potential to be as high as B tier, I think. But I had experience. And again, his availability makes it like he'll never be A tier, And even saying he might be B tier is pretty questionable because of his availability, but it's decent enough where I think it's possible. So, yep, a lot to talk. There's actually more to talk about Haar, but I'll move on from now. So, The next unit is going to be Shinon. So Shinon, he's a very interesting unit in the Fire Emblem ecosystem. Like, I already said about Haar, but Shinon's also a pretty interesting case, because he's kind of like a pseudo-Jagan. You actually do, maybe not need, maybe needs a strong word. You do need him. You actually do need him for a lot of the early maps. So you need him for Chapter 4, for sure. Like, Chapter 4, you need Godfrey, you need Titania, you need Shinon, for sure. Chapter 5, you need him. And then after that, those are the only 2 chapters where you absolutely need him, I'd say. And when he comes back, he's like absolutely useless. So useful in Chapter 3, Chapter 4, Chapter 5, Chapter 7. And you need him for 2 maps. And he's really helpful in 2 others. And I think it's valuable enough to be in C tier. Because D tier units have an average of like maybe, I don't know, like 1 map of consistent. Although maps aren't how we're scaling or valuing it. But, you know, let's just say like 1 map of value, where Shinon has multiple maps of value and he's actually needed. I think when you are dependent to like get through a map, that's bigger than just being good on that map. Like, the fact that you need Shinon is pretty important. So I think he has to be C tier. I cannot put him in D tier. Like, the fact that you need a unit for multiple maps, yeah, I don't think you put him in D tier. So C tier for now. He could be lower than, again, this is one where like I could see him going like, I guess he's going all the way down to the bottom of C tier, but I'm putting him here for now because I do think that it's easy to underrate how important early game units are. Because by the time you finish the game, you know, you've just been playing end game maps. You kind of forget how, you know, crazy some of the early game maps are, and he is really good in those early game maps. So yeah, keep him C tier. Okay. Next unit in C tier is going to be Mordecai. So he's definitely worse than Lethe. I think I've seen people put Mordecai above Lethe, or at least they're right next to each other. And yeah, I don't know how people think that. I mean, well, I know how. It's like, oh, you get them at the same time. They do kind of the same thing, similar class, whatever. They kind of feel the same. But Lethe is definitely better than Mordecai. Lethe definitely puts in more work for you than Mordecai. But he does have good impact. It's just the fact that he comes untransformed is like the problem. Lethe comes transformed, right, at the beginning of each map. So a lot of the maps, Mordecai just kind of walks around, and then, you know, maybe he'll have some impact later on. But I think with units like Mordecai and Lethe, it's important to analyze each map because, you know, they only have so much usage in this game. So again, Mordecai and Lethe, like, they are going to be good for when you have them, and then at a certain point, they just become useless, which is pretty interesting, because it's interesting that they're mid-game units that do that, rather than early-game units. So, you know, you get them, the first units you can use them are like Chapter 10, so, you know, from 10 till Chapter 18, like, or Chapter 17 being the latest, that's how useful Lethe and Mordecai are, or those are the duration that Mordecai and Lethe are useful for, from 10 to 17. And Mordecai, I'd say his impact is only really felt on Chapter 11, 12, and 13. Yeah, 14, no, 15, not, kinda, not really. 16, no, 17, a little bit. But 11, 12, and 13, for sure, his impact is felt. So 11's really nice because, you know, to get Zihark, you need Laguz, and you kind of need both Lethe and Mordecai to go that top right area with the house and all the Cavaliers and to rescue Zihark and all that stuff, because it is a pretty tough fight up there to just bring Mordecai or Lethe. So you kind of need both of them, and usually use a Laguz stone at this point for Mordecai to kind of safely get Zihark. So he's going to Chapter 11. Chapter 12, he's really good because you need to be able to tank and like sort of surround your squisher units while those birds just attack you. You have nowhere to run. So Mordecai's a great unit for that. And once he transforms, he kind of just does a lot of damage, and it's really nice. Then Chapter 13, I'd still say Lethe's better in Chapter 13, but Chapter 13 is where you really feel Mordecai's power, probably his peak, I'd say, because once he transforms, by the time he transforms, you have these birds you're chasing down, right? And those chests that those birds are trying to like snatch are so valuable. They have an occult scroll, energy drops, right? Like, I think they have a speed wing. So you need to be able to chase them down, and by that time, you don't really have enough units to chase them down effectively. However, Mordecai, if you're using Mordecai, which you should be using Mordecai at this point, he is sort of that last piece of the puzzle to killing all the birds, because he usually almost one-shots them. He takes like no damage from them, and it's just really he can hit them pretty easily as well. So chapter 13, like Lethe as well is pretty good on chapter 13, but you know, like Mordecai, that's where like I think his power spike is just killing those birds for you. But other than that, after that he kind of falls off. You know, he just walks around, doesn't do anything for you. So, you know, he's useful in all the maps you have him and are using him. But then, yeah, at a certain point he just becomes useless. So it's still above Shinon for me. He's valuable for more maps, I think, and for some of the longer maps or harder maps than Shinon is. But again, he can't go higher than this because, yeah, he does start off untransformed. He's a Laguz. He has no late game scaling. And yeah, but he does his job very well to be C tier. So now is for probably the most controversial take in this entire tier list, this next unit. Because most people are going to think he's much higher than this. I have Boyd in C tier. Yeah. So this is a really hot take, but keep in mind this is only for Maniac mode, and assuming you're not using like Emulator, you're not cheating, you're not, you know, save stating, like you're just using Boyd raw, you know, like, and in Maniac mode, I think he's the biggest trap unit in the game. It's kind of subtle what he does and why he's sort of a bad unit to invest in. So first off, you know, he's a very fun unit for sure. If you invest in him, he'll be, you know, do well throughout all of early game, mid game, right? Like he's going to do a lot of damage. You can kill everything if he wants, right? However, investing in Boyd is taking away from Oscar, who you want to ramp up as quick as possible, and also taking away from Ike, although Ike doesn't, you don't really worry about Ike. Ike will always, you know, hit his marks, because, you know, you can't promote him until chapter 18 anyways. But arguably, you'd rather invest in Titania than Boyd sometimes, because Titania Ike is a strategy you can do. Boyd has no like super late game potential because he has no good supports and he's too squishy. So, and he can't tank, he can't dodge tank, he just hits hard. And so that's a problem, because now he becomes sort of he almost becomes like a Rolf. He becomes like a player phase unit late game. You know, he can't survive enemy phases he can't survive enemy phases, and he can't get any support bonuses. There's no way to make him survive enemy phases. So it's just like you invested all this XP in this unit that you thought was going to carry you, and he's done well mid-game, early game, but now late games come, and now you're like, I kind of wish I put the XP in someone else. You know, I kind of wish I invested in someone else. Now I have this level 16 warrior that isn't that good, and I'd rather have someone else, you know? So he's a trap unit, which is why I'm putting him in C tier. He takes away from your team by investing in him, and he tricks you into using him. You'd rather just bench him the entire game, invest in Oscar, invest in Soren, invest in Ike, invest in Titania even, you know, and leave Boyd behind. That's what I'd say. So if you want a good team, you just kind of never use him. He just doesn't exist to you. It's so weird because, again, on paper, he actually does become decent, and he's good for like 80% of the game. But I think, like, to be better than that, like, the fact that he's good for 80% of the game, it's like, oh, you have to invest in him, though. And he takes you from your team. So it's different from, like, a Mordecai or Lethe, right, where, you know, they have no late game potential, right? At least you didn't have to invest in them, though. They don't take away from your team. Boyd will actively take away from your team if you invest in them, if you use them. Yeah, so, yeah, it's very controversial. I kind of want to make a whole video on Boyd. I could see him being B tier if you use a different type of team where you kind of afford to invest in a standalone unit. Like, I just don't know. Like, there's other standalone units I'd rather invest in. I'd honestly rather invest in Haar than Boyd. I'd rather invest in... who else? I can't really think right now, but there's other units I'd rather use than Boyd. So, yeah, very controversial, but he's C tier. Again, to reiterate, he cannot dodge tank, cannot tank. He just is too squishy in Maniac mode. We're talking about Maniac mode, not hard mode. Hard mode, he's way higher than C tier, I think. Okay. Next unit we have is Stefan. So this is going to be the last unit of C tier. So he joins in chapter 15, and he's very strong when you get him. It comes with like an amazing weapon, Vacati, you know, a pretty solid class. Actually, I take that back. Swordmasters aren't that amazing in Path of Radiance because there's no crit bonus, but you know, there's no investment needed for Stefan. You know, even if you've invested in Zihark at this point, Stefan will be around 7 levels higher. Like, so Stefan, like his he kind of just comes out in an insane point in the game. Like, it's kind of, when you see Stefan, you're like, why the hell did they give me this unit? Is this like a cheat code? That's what it feels like. Especially hard mode, it feels like that. However, in Maniac mode, he's just not as good because he has a few fatal weaknesses. So his fatal weaknesses are his low res, which all Sword Masters have, right? And resistance is really valuable stat to have in Path of Radiance because of all the siege tomes. But the other thing is his really low luck stat. So having low luck is bad in this game. The fact that like everything can kill him is super annoying because, you know, that means that he can't be a reliable combat unit in enemy phase, which, you know, is a given, but he also has no supports that give him dodge tanking. So it's just like he's a player phase unit. He's kind of like a bomb that you deploy. He's kind of like Boyd. He's like a Boyd, but you don't have to invest in him. And you get in chapter 15. He'll be really good for chapter 15, chapter 16, chapter 17, decent chapter 18, okay chapter 19, you know, filler 20, and then from there he just kind of gets worse and worse. Because again, like survivability becomes more and more important as the game goes on. Because you're just, you know, the enemies will die eventually. You just have to like survive their onslaught. There's just so many of them in Maniac mode. So yeah. Yeah, like chapter 19 is like Siege Tome Hell. You know, what can he do in chapter 19? Chapter 20 is an enemy phase map. Chapter 21 is another Siege Tome Hell map. And then it's like, then you get to late game, and now Stefan is, you know, he's kind of worn his welcome. He's always decent filler though. He will kill things. Even if you don't invest in him the entire game or use him, even on end game, he'll like be okay in just killing a few enemies at the very beginning. But he will probably die. If anyone unit's going to die in Iron Man, it's going to be Stefan. You know, like Stefan loves to die, just kind of like Boyd. So that's why you see tier. If he had higher luck and higher resistance and at least one good support, he would be like A tier. Like he would have so much potential. But alas, he just has those weaknesses, so you can't overlook them. Okay, and that is it for C tier. Okay, let's move on to the B tier. These units are good. You know, they can be used, you know, basically throughout the entire game for the most part. They're viable in most of the good teams, but you know, there's a few units that are like maybe a little controversial here. So we'll get into it though. The first unit in B tier is going to be Reese or Rise or whatever you want to call him. And he's in B tier, and he kind of feels like a traditional GBA Fire Emblem healer. You know, he can get killed. You know, he doesn't have Kanto, he doesn't have a horse, so he actually can be a liability, and sometimes he has trouble getting close enough to heal without a physics staff. Luckily, there are a lot of physics staffs in this game, so it's not as big of an issue as you'd think, but it is an issue. And yeah, he does get killed pretty easily because he's combat. So he is worse than Mist, in my opinion, because he doesn't get a horse. It's like, having Kanto is so nice in this game. Because you might think like, oh, you can always physics staff, but usually you want to physics staff and run away as well. You know, you get in range, just in range to physics staff, and then you run away. Especially for some of the late game maps. So, you know, that's kind of a problem. You do have a great availability with Reese, though, better than Mist. So, you know, he'll be useful no matter what for multiple chapters until you get Mist, and even then he'll be useful, you know, by the time, even if you switch to Mist. And his combat is, I mean, obviously not amazing, but he does do damage. So the problem with Mist is that she doesn't really do any damage. She's just a healer. Like, she gets swords, but can she really use swords? No. If you're using swords with her, you'd probably rather be giving that XP to someone else. And it's just not realistic. Reese, on the other hand, he actually does do damage with his, you know, his light tomes, and he does get Nosferatu, which, you know, gives him some level of survivability. So Reese does have some things going for him. You know, you give him like Nosferatu and an advantage. Like, that's not bad, you know? It's actually something. So he could go higher than this, honestly, because of that, but I do think having a mount is just too big of a deal for a healer. It's just too nice for him to be A tier when Mist exists in this game, you know? Because it's really hard to use both of them. You probably want to put that XP on someone else. It's not hard to use both of them, but you probably are only going to be using one of them. And when that's the case, there's competition for the best healer spot, and I think Mist wins out. then it's hard to justify Reese in A tier. But, you know, it's debatable. He could go higher than this. I don't think he goes lower than this, but he's a solid healer for this game. He feels similar to like some of your GBA healers like Natasha's or Mulder's or whatever. But, you know, he just gets outclassed by Mist, I think. So, okay. Now let's move on to one of the more interesting units on this list. One that a lot of people say I'm overrating is Braum. Because similar reasoning why Braum would be lower than this is I use for Reese, which is like, oh, there's competition. Why would you use Braum when you have Gotri? Gotri, you get him, you know, he'll be easier to invest. He has less investment cost. Sorry, I couldn't say that out loud. But he's better availability, less investment cost. I think their stats at the end are pretty similar. I forget who has like better, you know, strength defense. I have to check that stuff. But they probably both get 30 defense. But, you know, why would you just use Gotri if you want a general? And Gotri has an okay support with Astrid too. You know, I'd say he's probably better than Braum head to head. And yeah, again, requires less investment. And okay, I think I remember Braum is faster, more skilled, and Gotri is stronger and has more HP. So it's debatable who's better. Now, the reason that I put Braum in B tier, and I am putting him below Gotri, but it's not because, well, I'll get into it. Is because of the Zihark support. So I think Zihark is probably the most underrated unit in this game, which kind of spoiler alert. But the fact that he has a good support with Zihark, where they both get plus 15 avoid, Braum's support affinity isn't that great. It's a water affinity, but Zihark again has earth affinity, so it's plus 5, you know, times 3, so 15. So if you support with Zihark, the Zihark pairing leads to 92.6 avoid for Zihark, which is more than enough to be an effective dodge tank. More than enough. And 58.7 for Braum, which is not a lot. But he'll still be dodging, and he can't. And Braum also gets weapon triangle advantage once he promotes, because he gets swords as well. And he doesn't need to dodge everything. So, you know, that's like sort of the reason why it's not a big deal. He's a general, and the point isn't really for him to dodge tank everything, it's to help Zihark dodge tank everything. Braum will still dodge a lot, but if he does get hit, like, he won't notice it. And pure waters are easy to use in this game as well. Although Braum's resistance, I don't even think it's as bad as Zihark, so I have to check that. But also, enemies will also more often attack Zihark than Braum anyways, from my experience, which is good because Zihark's gonna be dodging most things. The only thing with Zihark we'll get into is that he doesn't have weapon triangle advantage. So, you know, even though on paper he has like the highest dodge in the game, maybe not the highest, but very high, top 3. Like the fact that he can only use swords means that, well, you know, he ends up being like in some trouble in certain situations. But either way, Braum sort of enables Zihark, and Zihark is a great unit when enabled by Braum. And the other thing about them is that they sort of work with each other in terms of their weaknesses. Braum, you know, he needs some speed. What else does he need? I guess he needs some skill, right? Zihark, he could use some defense at times. He could use some HP. So when it comes to like, okay, I need to use a stat boost for one of them, right? Let's say your other units don't need it. Like, the investment isn't, they're not hurting each other by existing in the same team. They're not competing for the same stat boosters, which is really nice when you have support pairings. Because again, I kind of treat them as a duo. Although Zihark, again, can be used in Muarim. Zihark is okay standalone, but I do think that Zihark is really only in the tier that he is with Braum as a support partner. So, what else can I say about Braum other than that he has a support? I mean, he's an okay class for Maniac mode because, you know, you want to be able to survive, and it's all enemy phase, and having high defense is nice. So, you know, units like Gotri, Braum, I think go up in Maniac mode as well. So, that's another reason why he's up in B tier in this mode. And another concept I haven't really brought up yet is the concept of like a late game superstar. So kind of a silly thing to talk about, but I think there's only one, I think he's one of 7 units that can become late game superstars, as I'm calling them. So it means that they're going to be part of a support duo where they become good enough to sort of be effective late game with that duo. Send them out, you can trust them, they're going to do their work, and they're, you know, consistent and reliable. And those 7, well, Braum is one of them. We'll get into the others. I might as well just say them now. It's going to be Ike, Oscar, Makalov, Astrid, Zihark, Kieran, Braum. So those are like the 7. Braum is one of the 7 because the support was Zihark. So, okay. I think it's enough for Braum. Like, when it comes to his skills, he's also a user of Wrath Resolve, but I don't think he's as good as like Naz or Ina. But he can use it because he does get high HP. But yeah, so that's Braum. Okay, next unit is Lethe. So now you might be wondering why Lethe's so high to be. She's kind of a mid-game unit that just you stop using after a while. I think the fact that she is she's just as she's better than Mordecai. She's reliable in the same ways I've already said about Mordecai, and she's useful in the same ways, except that she's just better. Like, every single chapter you use her in, from 10 to 17, she has value. She doesn't have optional value, she has value. And, she almost is a dependency in certain maps. Obviously, chapter 11, you kind of need Lethe Mordecai to get Zihark and deal with that top right area. But if you're only going to use one of them, you'd use Lethe, not Mordecai. Because again, she comes out transformed already. She's really good on chapter 13. So chapter 13 is one of the harder maps. I think it's an S tier difficult map. She's really good on chapter 13 at dealing with the mages that do a bunch of damage and hitting the Myrmidons. There's not a lot of units you'll have at this point that are good on chapter 13. Lethe is one of those units that is going to be good on chapter 13. She can kind of plug in the wall, what do you call it? The plank areas, the holes in the wall, or sorry, holes in the wall, the planks that are leading to your ship. She can plug those areas, and she's just a great sort of mini Jagan unit, or mini Jagan unit for 8 chapters or so. And I think that's good enough to be B tier. She has no negative value. She's just good anytime you use her, and yeah. What more can I say about Lethe? I've already said a lot about Mordecai. Same thing with Mordecai, just Lethe comes transformed and she's just better because of that. Oh, and another thing about Lethe, I should mention, she has an Ike support, right? 99.9% sure she's an Ike support. Yeah, so she does have Ike support. So, it's funny, I don't know if this really counts, but a lot of people people don't know this support system that well this game. And a lot of this tier list is based around the support system. So what I'm about to say isn't really a huge factor, or else the whole tier list kind of falls apart. But a lot of people support Ike with Lethe without realizing, just because they'll click the earliest supports. They'll do Ike, Titania, Ike, Lethe. And so because of that, she does become better on average for most people, because the Ike support is so damn good. She has a Heaven affinity, so I don't think it's that good. It doesn't give a void, so that's all that really matters to me. But she'll have plus 15 avoid if she gets A support with Ike, which is now she becomes really good. Kind of the same thing I was talking about with Ranulf. But I don't really think that's a huge factor that we need to talk about. But it's something. Okay, next up is Gotri. If I can find him. All right, here he is. So Gotri's another really interesting unit because, you get him for a bit and then he comes back pretty fast. And then he's still pretty good. So he's just he's just a really, he's the epitome of good in this game, I think. Anything above him is kind of great. Anything below him is decent. Except I think the one unit I have above him could go lower. It's actually a controversy. I'll talk about it later, but there's one unit above him that I'm still not sure about. It's sort of well, we'll talk about it. But Gotri is sort of a mini Jagan early game. Better than Shinon because he's just so damn tanky. In fact, even on chapter 5, he might be more reliable than Titania at times when it comes to defense. Titania could actually sometimes die because she kills everything, whereas Gotri is just a solid wall. Although, I can't use it as a factor because you could just unequip Titania, right? So it's not really a factor. But he's just really tanky, and he's really good when you have him early game. So that's chapter 3, 4, 5, right? 3, 4, 5, 7. Yeah. So he's amazing those chapters, and he is a dependency in some of those chapters, just like I said with Shinon. You actually need him. In fact, you need him for one more chapter, chapter 7, because to plug that, you can't really plug that area with Shinon. You gotta plug with the Gotri. So he's actually dependency for 3 chapters, although I guess the third one is kind of debatable. So that's really high value. Being a dependency is always really high value to me. And then same thing with Braum. Being a high defense unit in a maniac mode is higher value than it usually is, because it's enemy phase, or so many enemies are so strong that you just want to be able to survive as much as possible. Being able to kill things is nice, but being able to survive is nicer. But he's not going to be able to dodge tank like Braum. So we'll talk about that in a second. So yeah, his speed's low. So he'll be getting hit a lot, and can't reliably kill things because he can't reliably double things. However, he does have a great support with Astrid. I have to check that affinity real quick. Gotri is, okay, he's light? Or is it heaven? I think it's one of the two. And Astrid's wind. So he has an okay support with Astrid. And so the bonuses will lead, again, I only talk about the void because it's kind of the only relevant thing. We talk about support bonuses in this game. Astrid will be around 80, 79.7 on average, level 20, and for Godfrey will be 49. So Godfrey's not going to really be dodge tanking anything. And the problem is, like, even though it's a good support, because Godfrey's good, Astrid's good, 80 avoid on Astrid isn't really good enough to make her a reliable dodge tank. And, you know, that's not always a problem. 80 avoid is fine for some units, not for Astrid, because Astrid is just not defensive enough or tanky enough to not be able to dodge tank and be like a superstar. So that's why I don't include him in the superstar units, because even though he's a decent duo with Astrid, it's not good enough to like reliably get through super like way late game. Sorry, it's on my throat, but so there's sort of a idea of the 50% threshold. So because like these games are like what, double RN it's called, like when you're at 51% hit rate, you're actually more like at 54%. We're at 49% hit rate, you're more at like 46% or 45%. So you kind of want to get to a threshold where you're consistently like your enemies are consistently below 50% hit rate on you to be an effective dodge tank. And with this avoid bonuses, I don't think Gotchi definitely doesn't hit that threshold, and Astrid doesn't hit that threshold either. Especially because she's not going to get weapon triangle advantage because she starts with bows. So, you know, the difference between Makalov and Astrid is like Astrid starts with bows, so when she promotes, you give her like axes, but now it means that she's not going to consistently have weapon triangle advantage on her enemies, or at least weapon triangle neutral advantage, or whatever you call it. So, so he can't make Astrid a reliable dodge tank since she's somewhat squishy. So he's not the better duo option for Astrid, which we'll get into in a minute. So that all being said, you know, he's not going to be a superstar duo, but he's still very solid on his own. He is okay with Astrid. He will, you know, give her a B support, which is nice. Makes him a little bit better as well. And he is a unit, if you are making a team where you have an extra investment slot for a standalone unit, he's a decent pick because he will survive on his own late game. You know, he will hit 30 defense. You can just give him Pure Waters. He will do a little bit of damage. He can sort of, you know, be a decoy while your other units go somewhere else. Like, there are things he can do. So he's amazing early game, good mid game, and like okay, better than mediocre late game if you invest in him. Sometimes even better than that. It just depends, I guess. So, yeah. And then when you get him on chapter 13, he's not a unit you have to babysit to level him up. Braum, on the other hand, is kind of difficult to level up. Gotri is somewhat easy to level up, I'll say. Like, you know, because he's already high enough level where he's gone over the hump where it's like awkward and you have to, you know, babysit him. You just do not have to babysit him at all. And actually, in the chapter you get in chapter 13, he's very useful. So, and he's like a force deploy basically when you recruit him. So that's really nice. So where does that put him? Amazing early game, solid mid game. Choose to use him, okay or good late game. Never feels great. I think that's epitome of B tier. Okay, I need to take a break because my voice is going. Okay, the last unit of B tier, top of B. Although I think she can be lower than this. This is another controversial one, just like Boyd. It's Marcia. Some people think Marcia is the best unit in this game. I think they're usually talking about hard mode though, which hard mode maybe I can agree she's definitely S tier, but in Maniac mode, like it's just a different game. Like different things matter. In Marcia, like yeah, she just does not hit the benchmarks of being an S tier, A tier unit to me. Like, so there's a lot of reasons why we have to get into all of them to justify this ranking. So she's not a good support affinity. She has a fire affinity. So while she does have some decent support partners, there's only one of them that's like somewhat viable. And even with that viable unit, which is Kieran, it's not enough to be high avoid. So it'll only be plus 7.5. So her base max avoid, or base avoid at like, you know, level 20 promoted is 73.6. With Kieran support, it's 81.1, and with Tanith support, it's 88.6. Tanith support obviously being better, but Tanith, well, she's not as reliable to have as a support partner as Kieran because she's going to be squishy as well. So even though she's really fast, she has high speed, good luck, she's still, with these stats, at most 88.6, but really it's more like 81. She still doesn't dodge tank as well as Zihark, Oscar, Ike. Nowhere close to as good as Ike. On top of that, she also doesn't have a weapon travel advantage. That's another thing. So, even though her dodge is fine, it's actually a little worse than units like Makalov, because Makalov at least has weapon travel advantage when he promotes. And on top of that, the point of dodge tanking is that you have a support partner that you can use enemy phase together, like for infinite turns together. And Kieran, Kieran, you're just going to be like ruining what Kieran can do in this game by pairing him with Marcia. Instead of getting a plus 30 avoid with Oscar, which is one option, which we'll talk about, he'd only getting plus 7.5. So now Kieran and Marcia would be a liability super late game. So they don't become like a superstar duo, is the point I'm getting at. She has not hit the threshold or the benchmarks, is a better way to say it, of becoming a superstar duo with anyone. Whereas, like other units do. So... And again, like the rule of thumb is can these units, 2 units, take on infinite enemy units? Like obviously the answer is no for everything. No one can take on infinite enemy units, but like you have to think about that. Like could they take on 100 units? If the answer is like no, for sure, then they're not a superstar unit. And again, this is Maniac mode. Hard mode, of course she's good enough to be S tier. Like she'll be tanky enough, she'll be dodgy enough, she doesn't need any supports. And in hard mode versus Maniac mode, combat matters a little bit less. Like Maniac mode, combat matters so much more than utility. Sacred Stones, like the flyers, are so damn good. They're clearly like S tier units because the combat just isn't as important. It's like, you warp around, you get, it's just, movement is just so much, you break the game with movement. Path of Radiance, you can't really break the game with movement. There's only a few maps where that's the case, which is like Chapter 17, Part 2, Chapter 24, it's really nice. There are some, it's good, but it doesn't break the game, I'd say. And you can't really use it as well as you could in hard mode because, trying to break the game, these flyers in Maniac mode leads these flyers dying because the enemy's just so damn strong. And even when we talk about, the flyer utility in this game, Jill is just better for that. Like, Jill is just a better standalone unit than Marcia. And I'm saying this as someone who, I used Jill in a Maniac mode run, my very first one, and we got through it, but Jill is a huge disappointment because she didn't like level up her speed at all. So I know what a bad Jill feels like, and I still feel like I still can see on paper that Jill is just a better unit as a flyer in this game, like because she can survive when doing like those side objectives. So Chapter 24 is a great example. Chapter 24 is a really hard map without a flyer, because you kind of have to like make your way through a whole wave of enemies up to Geoffrey before he dies. And without a flyer, it can be really difficult to get to that arrive space. But Marcia is just like, even with a full guard, she's not tanky. She's not going to have a support partner when she's flying around. So she's not going to be dodging anything. She's going to be getting hit for a lot. And it's like, it's not reliable. Jill is much better for that. And even with Jill, it's hard. It's not really reliable either. And she also isn't strong. She caps at 23 strength, which isn't bad, but she's not going to be like one-rounding most things, even on player phase. Zihark only has 24 strength, for instance, who I think is really good. It's pretty average, but he comes to Adept, has a practical support duo, where he's need to run one-around things, right? Like, it's a different ball game there. Like, and yeah, I just think that, all these things combined, she can't be A tier for me. She just can't be. Anything else to say about Marcia? We didn't really talk about her availability and all that stuff. You get her pretty early, Chapter 9, and she's not that hard to use, although she's not that easy to use. You kind of do have to invest in her or Jill if you're going to use them, which is a problem. And she is a mid-game menace, like same with Jill. Like these flyers are mid-game menaces. Like they do very well, like on, Daybreaks, Chapter 15, like they do very well. It's just that super late game or late game, like, they're not doing what you want them to do. They're not doing what they usually do in hard mode. They're actually like disappointing as hell, whereas like you'd rather have a unit that it specializes in combat for Maniac mode. You know what I mean? rather than a utility unit. So, okay. That's the last of B tier. So now we're moving on to A tier units. So the first A tier unit is Jill. So I guess this is still controversial here. Because it's like, why is she not an S tier? She's a flyer, she's better than you just said all those things about Marcia. But notice I didn't really bring up the competition thing. Because I don't think Jill is that much better. That's why I didn't bring it up. Like, Jill is still good, obviously she's an A tier, but she doesn't, it's tough to make her a superstar unit. Now, there is one caveat, which, you know, if you're listening to earlier part of this video, I talked about how Haar has some hidden potential. Well, that doubles for Jill. If Haar has hidden potential, Jill has hidden potential, because her main issue, well, we've already kind of alluded to it, it's going to be her super late game. But anyways, let's talk about her a little bit. So you get her chapter 12. She's a great class. She comes with a Lagu's Guard. You know, if you invest in her, she's going to be amazing mid-game. Amazing. Oh, Marcia too, right? Same. Everything I say about Jill probably doubles for Marcia, honestly, because, you know, you get Marcia earlier. If you're investing one of them, Marcia will probably be even better than Jill mid-game. But, you know, for chapter 12, she's not that amazing. She can at least survive. But chapter 13, if you invest in her, like, she's super good at dealing with the birds. So, you know, it's not as chaotic. If you invest in Jill and you just make her deal with all the birds that are flying around the top left, then chapter 13 becomes way, 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 way easier. Chapter 14 doesn't really change with Jill. Chapter 15 becomes nice because, you know, the sand, like, she can fly around. She's not, you know, she's not quicksand or anything. She's not, you know, stifled by the movement. Chapter 16, she's great. Chapter 17, she really shines. I'm not gonna go through each chapter, but, like, I'm just saying mid-game, she's, like, really nice. And if you invest in her, she'll be able to kill things reliably. And she does, you know, make a lot of maps easier, and she has very good durability, unlike Marcia. And so she can make your life, like, a lot easier on late game maps, especially chapter 24, which you've already kind of talked about. But that being said, the view of how good she is a little bit skewed, because I think it's mostly people that, first off, haven't played Maniac mode, like, that think they're playing Maniac mode, they're not. But it's also people playing on emulators that don't feel the pain of a unit death. She can be a decent standalone unit, and she can even enemy phase for a bit, but you can't do it consistently, like the superstar units. And if you're playing on console, it means you're wasting, like, hours having Jill get killed because you're using her as if she's still a superstar combat unit, like in hard mode, which is just not Maniac mode. She can't dodge things that well, you know. She's gonna get hit, and she's gonna get whittled down, and, you know, her speed's decent, but I wouldn't say it's reliable in killing things either. So, and another thing about her, where, you know, a lot of people think, like, oh, well, you know, she's still a mounted unit. I mean, the difference between Paladins and Jill is that Paladins get soul. Like, that, like, the sustain of soul and ether is so amazing in this game. And yeah, Jill just doesn't have that. So, you know, she'll get whittled down after a while if you try to make her a standalone unit. However, she still does fit into most teams. It's just that I don't think she fits in what I currently view as the best team. Because you just don't have enough XP to, like, invest in her. However, I'm starting to change my mind on that. Like, I'll talk about it later. But I do think that there's, like, a really amazing meta team that does use Jill for sure. Probably multiple. But you do have to sacrifice, like, something for her, which, again, we'll talk about. So she's still amazing. She's still A tier. But I do think she falls off a little bit really late game versus some of your other superstar units. But yeah, she's just a very good unit that requires investment. She does require investment. So, okay, let's talk about what I view as the most underrated unit in the entire game, the Zihark. So a lot of people will have never seen Zihark in A tier, which I understand. But I think in Maniac mode, because it's not hard mode, I do not think he's A tier in a hard mode. In Maniac mode, I think he's the most underrated unit in the game, because if you invest in him once you get him, which is chapter 11, just a little bit, give him like a Draco Shield, a Forge, and a little bit of bonus XP, he will be good, not just for mid-game, but for the entire game, without any more excessive investment. Like, he'll just be good, and then one of your best units, and one of the only units that can be really good super late game. Savage stats are better than Mia's. His only real weakness being resistance, which, you know, it's easier to offset resistance weaknesses in Path of Radiance versus, like, GBA because they have so many item slots. you have extra item slots just for items versus weapons. So, you can use Pure Waters in that. He comes with Adept, which is, Mia comes with Vantage, which is better, but, Zihark comes with Adept, and you get a Vantage scroll from chapter 14, I think. So an Adept is really good for Sword Masters, because it will proc a lot and give more crit chances. He's an amazing Vantage user as well. Because again, Vantage with Adept kind of goes crazy. A lot of times on enemy phase, he'll just, enemies will never be able to attack him. And you pair that with the main reason he's an A tier, which is his Earth Affinity support, which is the best support type in the game. And you pair that with Braum, now you have a dodge tank, an effective dodge tank, that now has Vantage Adept, that is kind of killing everything, and, doesn't really have to worry about his resistance being an issue because he has Pure Waters, and he has decent defense. And on top of that, in Maniac mode, it is hard to kill things. You need units with strength, skill, and speed. You need all 3 benchmarks to kill things reliably. And Zihark has all 3, right? You never have to worry. That's the only reason I actually started experimenting with Zihark, was God, it's so hard to kill things in this game with because I was using Jill a lot. I was Jill is just not killing things. She's just kind of there. It'd be so nice to just have a unit that can kill things and just figure out how to make them good, and Zihark was that answer. I knew Zihark could kill things as his base stats, but then I didn't realize how good his supports were, and how that could kind of open him up as a superstar option. So again, with Braum, his support, his dodge bonus would be plus 15. With Muarim, it's 22.5. So with Muarim, he's technically better, but it's not worth bringing Muarim along because he's a liability. And like I said, Braum is a perfect partner for Zihark because they require opposite investments. Braum wants Speedwing, Seer Books, Zihark wants Draco Shields, Angelic Robes, and maybe Energy Drops if you get unlucky. And with 15 Avoid bonus for both of them, Zihark becomes a legit dodge tank, almost on par with Ike Oscar. 92.6, so here are the numbers. So on average, including support bonuses, Zihark would have 92.6 at max level, 96.2 for Oscar, and 105.3 for Ike. So clearly a step below Ike and Oscar. And, again, Oscar does get weapon triangle advantage, so he's clearly a worse dodge tank than those two. But, he's in the same room with them. They're just really busted. like what Ike and Oscar do in this game is so absurd. Yeah, it's just so absurd what they do in this game. But, Zihark is still an effective dodge tank. On endgame, when you have him and Braum on the left side doing all the paladins and the wyverns, he'll probably never get hit. He'll probably dodge every single attack. So, yeah, and then again, he does make Braum a little bit better as well, slightly better dodge tank, but Braum doesn't really need to be a dodge tank. So all this combined ends up being good the entire game, and then being a god duo with Braum endgame, which is one of only a few superstar duos. I'd say Braum, Zihark are the best duo to dodge tank. Let me think. Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, assuming you're using Ike Oscar, right? Because now at that point you can't use Kieran. I do think Zihark Braum is better than, well, you can kind of use process elimination to figure out Makalov Astrid somewhere in this tier. I think they're better than Makalov Astrid because Astrid, she has the same problem as Zihark, where she can only use one weapon, so she doesn't get weapon triangle advantage, or she can never avoid a weapon triangle disadvantage. However, her dodge is going to be worse than Zihark. She's going to be squishier than Zihark most likely, so that's a problem. So I do think that when you have Zihark and Braum as dodge tanking versus Makalov Astrid, you feel safer with those two. You definitely do feel safer. Also, he gets to use the Vague Caudy. So, endgame is so nice to give Zihark the Vague Caudy and Rune Sword, just let him go crazy. Well, the Rune Sword isn't as important, but, if you do want to stay safe, Zihark base will never die or have any worry endgame with the Rune Sword and Vague Caudy. He's completely fine. But yeah, once again, the only downside about Zihark is he's sword locked, so unlike a Makalov, he can experience weapon triangle disadvantage, and against some of the Lance Wyverns, it can be annoying. It'd be nice in chapter 24, to go on the top side and deal with all those guys with Zihark Braum, but you just can't reliably because all the Wyverns. So that is a problem that's kind of, you know, it could make him lower even this, because that, like, I'm not going to lie, like, he could be top of B tier, bottom of A, but I think this is fine for now, just because I do value his, like, ascension in very late game, which, you know, only a few units can do, and he's one of those units. So, and if you want to see footage of what Zihark can do, you can watch my, you know, Maniac Mode Deathless run. Like, he's just really, really damn good. Very late game. So, alright, that's Zihark. Alright, next up we have Astrid. So, Astrid, she's also kind of an interesting unit, but a very good one. She's decent availability coming at Chapter 13, but she does require investment because she comes in at like level 1, you know, unpromoted. But she does have the Paragon ability, so she's pretty easy to level up, but she doesn't level up that fast, you know, with Paragon. I do see people exploit bosses in Chapter 15, 16 to ramp her up, but I'm not going to consider that. Like, if you consider boss grinding as part of this game, like, obviously Astrid is going to be higher in this, I think. Like, with boss grinding, Astrid becomes insane in this game, because she effectively boss grinds on Muarim, but yeah, let's not consider that at all. So without that, like, it is a little bit annoying to invest in her, especially if you're investing in Makalov too, because they're both going to be kind of bad mid-game, and you're purely investing them just for late-game scaling. So, yeah, and she does use bows as well, which is another... It's decent, because bows are fine in this game, because you can use them on wyverns, and they are hard to kill, and, you know, there is a payoff there. But the issue with that is that, you know, with the Superstar Duo, you want to be able to survive, and with the Makalov Astrid duo, she does become the clear liability between the two, because she can only use, well, you're probably going to put axes on her, right? And so, if anyone has swords, for instance, like, you're kind of shitting yourself, whereas Makalov has no problem. And she'll probably be promoting around, like, Chapter 18 in most runs. So, by Chapter 18, like, okay, now she's starting to become, like, a decent unit. And then, you know, again, she's a paladin, so this is our first... Well, Geoffrey's our first paladin, right? But this is our first paladin we're actually going to be talking about. So paladins, they have soul, right? They can use soul. Astrid's not going to be using soul for a while because you're going to be sticking with Paragon. But soul is like an amazing thing for her on late game. But although I probably shouldn't be talking about soul right now, because again, you only put it on her like very late game. The Paragon, though, like once she promotes Chapter 18 or Chapter 19, Paragon doesn't just go away, so she'll keep leveling up fast, and eventually she'll be like, there's a certain like inflection point where she becomes really good because she's like just higher level than everything, but then it kind of goes back down. Like it doesn't last as long as you'd think, and then she ends up being like, okay, the clear weaker link in the support duo. She's decent stats, but not the best because of her low defense and HP. I'd say she has like the second worst stats among the paladins. Although her consistent speed growth is nice to have, and ensure she can accomplish her primary role, which I'm about to get into. So she has one of the best supports in the game, making her a superstar unit, is with Makalov. She also has great support with Godfrey. Support with Makalov will lead to an Astrid avoid for Astrid of 87.2, and for Makalov 83.25. So she'll have higher avoid than Makalov at max level. Now we talked about with Godfrey, it'll be 79.7, so much lower. Also, I didn't say it, but she has wind affinity, Makalov has thunder affinity, so that's why she have more avoid with Makalov than Godfrey. So the Godfrey support is fine, but it's too low, and it puts Astrid still at risk because her defense only averages to 19.4, and that means that she needs to be able to dodge tank to be a superstar because she's low HP, low defense. You know, sure, you can give her a Night Ward, which is, by the way, a really great thing for Paladins. Another reason why they're so good. Give her a Night Ward and give her a Draco Shield, whatever. But, you know, like, you can say that for all the Paladins. And, yeah. So with Godfrey's support, she's fine, but she's still going to be at risk because, you know, the 80 avoid is not high enough to dodge tank. And she's only going to have, like, 19.4 defense. And even with a Night Ward, that's still, like, not enough to get through late game as a superstar unit with Godfrey. Like, she's still gonna be a liability. So that is a problem. That's why, like, Makalov is just clearly a better support to have with her. You know, it's not a crazy amount more avoid, but it's enough to get her over the threshold where, you know, most units are having less than 50% hit on her, probably around like 20s. So she will be able to dodge tank with Makalov. Yeah, and on top of that, like Makalov is just better than Gotri in like every way. Makalov is sort of a self-sufficient unit, you know. Again, we're gonna talk about him, but late game Makalov's bases are, in my opinion, the best of all the paladins. And you know, he'll have soul most likely with Astrid, so yeah. So yeah, Makalov is just a much better duo than Gotri. And if you use Makalov with Astrid, I do think they are considered a superstar duo. Actually, I definitely, what am I saying? They're like the more common superstar duo besides Ike and Oscar, or Oscar Kieran, which we'll get into. Because they just, yeah, they do their job very well late game. You know, they're both paladins that both can have soul, and, you know, they're both really great. However, on her own, like, I don't think she's really worth it unless you're going to be exploiting bosses or using bans, or she has a blessed defense or something. Like, I would say if you want to use Astrid in Maniac mode without bans and without grinding, I would treat Makalov as a dependency and maybe Gotri. Like, that's how I see Astrid. She's not really a standalone unit like a Jill is. So yeah, that's Astrid. Okay, next up, I actually just like debated on these two for quite a long time. And I had to go through some hypotheticals to come to my conclusion. And I actually initially, for a long time, had it the other way around, but now I have Makalov next. And I'll just tell you, I was deciding between Makalov and Kieran, and I had Kieran here for a while, but now I have Makalov. So, but let me just talk about Makalov's strengths before I get into why I have Kieran above Makalov. So he's a very underrated unit in this game as well, kind of like Zihark. And his value is kind of all in late game. So a lot of people just never use him long enough to know that he's amazing. You know, you kind of have to look at the whole cast and look at who can become good on paper in order to figure out, okay, Makalov is actually viable. So, you know, you do have to invest in him. He comes with the Master Seal. You don't really want to use it. You want, you know, him to promote naturally because his value comes from being again, a superstar unit, which, you know, he has a few potential support partners, but the main one is Astrid, of course. He's the best class in the game, I'd say. Like, he gets Soul, a Mount, Canto, right? He gets a Night Ward, right? Like, it's amazing. The plus 15 Avoid from Astrid, of course, and he has the best average stats of any paladin in the game at max level. Better than Kieran, better than Oscar, right? Like, his average stats are just amazing. So, and you will feel it in the late game. You'll feel like, oh wow, okay, Makalov is scaled. Like, now he's just reliable and he's killing everything and I don't have to worry about him ever. And he's better at killing things than Oscar, he's better at killing things than Kieran. This is, you know, it feels really good. But it only happens very late game. It probably happens around like at the earliest, like chapter 24, 25, but, you know, it just depends on how good you are at leveling him up along with your other units. Compared to Kieran, I do have some stats here. Compared to Kieran, he has 1 less resistance, 2 more defense, 1 more luck, 2 more speed, 3 less skill, 1 more HP. Compared to Oscar, he has 3 less resistance, 3 more defense, 1 more speed, 4 less skill, 2 more strength, 2 more HP. So, you know, you give one 2 Draco Shield, a Speed Wing, and an Energy Drop. Give the other 2 Talismans and 2 Secret Books. I think the first one's better. 2 Draco Shield, Speed Wing, and an Energy Drop is better than, you know, more resistance in a game where pure waters are abundant and easy to use. Compared to Astrid, I'm sorry, I'm going to keep doing this, but compared to Astrid, he's 5 less resistance, 6 more defense, 4 less skill, 8 more HP, 3 more strength. I don't need to go over the stat boosters. And then compared to Titania, 5 less resistance, 7 more defense, 4 less luck, 3 more speed, 2 less skills, 6 more strength, 2 more HP. So, you know, I think we can stop there. Like, Geoffrey is just strictly better than every way. So, best paladin in terms of his stats in endgame. He's a great Vague Caudy user. So people don't really talk about that. People actually complain about his sword use. But the thing is, like, the Vague Caudy exists. There's not a Vague Caudy equivalent for axes or lances, right? Like, there just isn't. The Vague Caudy Night Ward Soul on Makalov just goes crazy, right? Like, he can even become a standalone unit, by the way, at late game without Astrid. So there is that option as well. You don't have to use Astrid with him. And if you don't use Astrid, by the way, he'll actually ramp up faster and become a good unit in mid game as well. Whereas with Astrid, because you're leveling them both, it probably becomes a late game unit, right? Which takes away from his value. But again, I do value late game higher than early game because those chapters are harder and take longer in general. So, so by end game, I'd say he ends up being like your second best combat unit, like better than Oscar, better than, because you know Ike's gonna be on his own for the most part. Like if you're doing Ike Oscar support, only thing is you're doing Oscar Kieran support, it's different. But you know when it comes to like a lot of teams, Maklav would be like around your second best combat unit. Late game, like end game. His avoidance average is 83.25, which you know obviously isn't as good as Ike Oscar Zihark, but combined with his amazing stats where he averages 25 defense, 51 HP, network capability, Vakati capability, weapon triangle advantage, ability to never have weapon triangle disadvantage, and soul, he's more than just reliable enemy phase. And also gets 1-2 range, right? Like, whereas Ike and Zihark don't get that. And so, yeah, he's just amazing. The downside is that he comes at level 10 on chapter 14 with swords and kind of bad bases. I mean, not bad base, just he's level 10, right? And he kind of could use like an Astrid icon in a secret book. He can be difficult to use at times depending on what your team is. Like, he's not hard to use if he's your only unit you're training, but if you're training Astrid and Maklav, which I usually am, and Braum, like, it can be a struggle to manage them all. Not a struggle, but it isn't as easy if you're to just use other units, right? But the payoff is there, of course. So it's a trade-off. And the trade-off is worth it because, in my opinion, you know, you're going to have a harder mid-late game, but your late game and your late game are going to be a lot easier. And I think, you know, if you take a different route, late game can feel impossible. It's better to have like a slightly harder mid game, which is still doable, just slightly, you know, more annoying versus a near impossible late game, you know? So yeah, that's like the most of the things about Maklav. You know, he's going to be a sword axe user. He's going to be really good. He has his flaws, right? But overall, he has such absurd strengths that I think he ends up in A tier for sure. And he could even be one rank higher than this. But I'm going to keep him here because I have some reasons why I think Kieran is slightly better than him. So I'll just go over the reason why I have Kieran here instead of behind Maklav. The reason why I had Kieran even behind Maklav in the first place is because I thought Kieran was slightly overrated because, you know, it is like kind of hard to use him. Like a lot of, not hard to use him, sorry. It's like when you use Kieran, it's like, oh, it's a no-brainer. I'm gonna use Kieran, of course, because he's like another paladin and, you know, he has axes. It's great. But then he kind of just does nothing for most of the game afterwards. He ends up kind of being the only unit you're not using, and he just kind of sits there and just decays. So you do need to have intention when you use Kieran. And the reason why I had him below Maklav was like, well, he doesn't really form a superstar duo because, you know, you can do Kieran Oscar support, but if you do Kieran Oscar support, you're taking away from Ike Oscar support, which is the best support in the game, which is true. Maklav doesn't take away from that, Kieran does. So the opportunity cost of using Kieran is either you have a paladin doesn't have any good support partners. I mean, he has Marcia, but they only get plus 7.5 avoid, which is, you know, not really great. We already talked about Marcia. His support partner is Oscar, obviously. So if you duo him the Oscar, 22.5 avoid, yeah, they'll both be great, but they won't be as great as Ike Oscar. And now Ike is on his own, right? Or you can use Titania, which we'll talk about. But I thought about it a little bit more, and I was like, you know what, 22.5 avoid is really good still. It's still enough to sort of go through the entire game with them and not have to worry about them. And there are some pros of going with Kieran Oscar, right? Because the benefits of going Kieran Oscar means that, well, you don't need to use Maklav Astrid at that point, right? You don't need to invest in these harder to use units. You can kind of just use Kieran and use some other units, right? You can maybe use more standalone units, use Jill, whatever. Because now you have Kieran Oscar, and so now other things get easier for you. And on top of that, Ike is already good on his own. Ike is one of those few standalone units because he has Ether as well. And then Oscar Kieran have Soul. So you probably only give one of them Soul, but that's fine because you can usually split aggro by giving the weaker one like a hand axe or something. So I thought about it and I was like, you know what? The potential of a Kieran Oscar A support with you know, Ike just being standalone, which is fine. Maybe a Titania support with Ike, right? And then being able to invest in some other units, having an easier mid game, just for a sacrifice of having maybe a slightly less optimal super late game, I think is still around as just as good as what I view as the best team in the game. And it's actually an easier path for the most part. Like, so because of that, I put him above Makalov. Actually, that's not the only reason. The other reason is because, you know, he's obviously easier to use. You get him a few chapters earlier, better availability, higher level, comes with axes, right? Like, he's instantly useful, whereas Makalov is not instantly useful. So that's actually usually the main reason people put Kieran over Makalov. I should mention that. So there's that, plus the fact that, you know, even if you consider only late game and his potential, he's still on par with Makalov for those reasons. So, okay. So that's like all the complicated stuff about Kieran's placement. The normal stuff is that, you know, he's Canto. He starts with axes, which is like the best weapon type in the game. He has great bases, good gross. You know, he can use soul. Like, he has amazing supports, obviously, with Oscar. So, you know, he's a great unit. And yeah, he's still in a weird place. I could still see Makalov being better than him. I kind of just need to try out Kieran Oscar and see how much worse it is than using Ike Oscar. I know it is worse. I just don't know how much, like, by how much. Is it worth it to do that if you get like an extra standalone unit? That's good. I don't know. But on paper, it seems close enough to where I think Kieran probably still beats out Makalov. But they're basically tied in my head, and I had it like this for a long time. So, okay. So now all the units are going to be, you know, either crazy utility or the best units in the game. So next we have Mist. So she's an amazing unit. Great availability. You get her chapter 9, and you have her for most of the game. You get her level 1, which is a little annoying. But it's worth it because she becomes your Canto healer. I mean, Elincia is a Canto healer too, but, you know, Canto healer used for most of the game. And she's not like Ike where she, you know, needs to wait to get promoted. You can promote her straight up at level 10. So it doesn't take long. And you don't have to wait around for her stats to improve. Like, just once you get to level 10, just Master Seal her, you know. On top of that, she helps through the Black Knight fight, which is nice because it helps you get Nasir. The only thing is that her combat, like we mentioned during the Rise section, is that her combat isn't that great. Like, she'll survive, though. That's one thing that she has, that she is pretty good surviving for a female Fire Emblem healer. Like, usually they struggle, but she does not really struggle. Like, her stats are pretty decent. She's pretty dodgy, somewhat tanky. She has good resistance. She's not tanky, but, like, she can hold her own for a few fights. And she does have swords, so I guess if there's an axe user, she'll be able to dodge him pretty easily. But again, like, the only thing that's good about her combat is that she has Rune Sword potential, right? That's cool. And Rune Sword, like, with her magic, would go crazy for the last 3 chapters. But grinding her to Rune Sword is pretty difficult. Like, you could use Arm Scrolls, but you kind of want to save those Arm Scrolls for Siege Tome usage to ensure that you're able to, like, skip a chapter and kill those bosses. But it's something to look into, and something people do, for sure, like grind out her sword. So, you know, it's something. Something worth exploring to see, like... Because imagine Mist with a Rune Sword endgame. Like, that'd be awesome. Because she will definitely survive a lot of attacks with a Rune Sword there. And she will do a lot of damage. So, it's interesting to think about. Another thing about the Rune Sword is if you do give her the Rune Sword, like, your probability of being the Black Knight improves. Because now, you know, you don't have to run away with Mist. You can just keep healing Ike, and she can take on the enemies. There are a lot of physics staffs in this game, so her value obviously goes up because of that as a healer. Same with Reese. But the reason why she is a tier above Reese is because of the mount. The mount comes in handy in basically every single chapter except for chapter 15, where it actually hurts her. Other than that, the mount is helpful all the time for rescue dropping, for just healing and running, for saving physics staff usage, for, you know, whatever. Like, it's just, I don't need to explain why mounts are good in Fire Emblem, I guess. So that's Mist. I think she's good enough to be an A tier. She's kind of a must roster unit, I'd say. Whereas actually, when I think about it, are any of these units must roster besides Mist? No, that's actually really interesting. None of these units below Mist are must roster. You don't have. I don't use Jill anymore. You don't have to use Zihark. You don't have to use that strat. You could use Jill instead. You don't have to use Makalab Astrid. You don't have to use Kieran. I don't use Kieran anymore. So none of these units are must roster. I mean, except for portions of the game where you have to use Lethe, you have to use Mordecai. But in terms of like for your final roster, the only one I'd say is like kind of must roster, or else you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. For sure, is like Mist. Although I guess there is some debates for Reese because he does do damage, but whatever. Okay, let's move on. So next unit, we're still in A tier, but this one is kind of arguably S tier. But I don't know. It depends on who, like, what you value. Is Racing. So it's hard to. This one, he could be a little higher, but. At the end of the day, there's certain things I value, which is going to be the Sage's utility over Racin's utility, and their availability is also really nice. But let's talk about Racin right now. So, he's an amazing unit. Keep calling she. He's an amazing unit. Arguably S tier, arguably better than the 2 units above him. He enables some crazy things. He enables some really insane things in certain chapters. Like, let's see. So, obviously, chapter 18 is very valuable in recruiting Shinon and all that stuff. 19, very valuable, of course, with Naesala. Chapter 20, not as valuable. Chapter 20, he kind of doesn't exist. 21, very valuable. 22, we don't really care. 23, we don't really care. Actually, okay, one of Racin's best uses is when the reinforcements come from the enemies, Racin sort of like saves your team. Because by that time, he'll usually be transformed, and now all your units, or your main units, get 2 chances to attack. So, chapter 23, that comes into play when those reinforcements come. 24 comes into play. 25, Racin's fine. Oh, no, sorry. What am I saying? 25 is like super important because he enables the siege tomes. Same with 22. Yeah, sorry. I'm going through all the chapters, but it's kind of important right now when he's deliberating between the top units of the game. 26, he's good, of course. 27, he's good. 28, he's whatever. And 29, he's really good. So, yeah, he's like amazing on most of the game. He doesn't really break the game like you want him to, or like a lot of people think he does. But yeah, it usually doesn't feel that game breaking. Not as game breaking as another unit we're going to be talking about. He has a good support with Tanith, making it easier for him to survive attacks, like a few attacks. Better than you expect. Like, he avoids more than you expect him to. And in the end game, I think he's definitely a top 5 unit in end game for sure. Like, he really could be top of A or bottom of S when I'm thinking about it. Because when I think about end game, like, you kind of need him in end game. Ah, man, it's so hard. So hard. Okay, I'm gonna keep him here, but he could be better than this. It's so hard to say. This is the first one I'm actually rethinking it. Because in endgame, he is so important, like, to get your guys to attack twice so that you can sort of, because you're in a time crunch in endgame with Ashnard, right? Like, he's so important, but he kind of enables the units above him, so it's debatable. It's still debatable, but and if you don't know what Racing does, actually, I probably shouldn't talk about that. It's not the audience. You guys all knew what Racing does. I guess the only reason that he's below the units above him is that his availability isn't that good. He's kind of useless in a few chapters, but he just has like these bursts of value that are just insane. Whereas the units above him are just like kind of valuable more consistently. So, it's debatable. Okay, let's move on though. Next is Ilyana and Soren. I'm going to talk about, I'm just going to put them both next to each other right now. Because Ilyana is just not that different from Soren. But I guess we can talk about Soren first. And then we can kind of just, branch it out to Ilyana for kids. So, Soren is like a great unit with fantastic utility. But that's what he is. And in Path of Radiance, the mages are kind of just utility units. Like, they're not that great as combat units. And surprisingly, that still puts them at top of A tier. Like, in main mode, it really is difficult for sages to not become like heal bots and siege tome users. But that's enough, to be high value. Because healing is really important in this game. Siege tomes are really important. Like, he still is an A tier because Healing and Siege Tome utility. The Siege Tomes can be coming into play like chapter 22, 25, 27 endgame. Plenty of utility is useful from promotion till endgame. Like there are physics staffs everywhere, so you'll be getting value from those throughout the game. That's probably the main reason, by the way, that he's an A tier, along with Ileana, is physics staffs. Like if there weren't as many physics staffs, they'd probably be in B tier. But the fact that they're so abundant is like you're going to be constantly getting value. You're going to constantly be like, wow, how could I ever get through this chapter without these guys? You know, or whichever one you're using, because the physics staff is just so nice. And I guess you can say, well, I use on Mist. Well, you probably want them both. You probably want to use both physics staffs, or probably want to use both healers with physics staffs. So, and then his combat, like I said, he's not a combat unit, but when it comes to like, he is sort of the best player phase unit against the most dangerous enemies. Like his wind tomes against wyvern riders and his adept, like that is like you'll be in situations where it's like, damn, how could I get through this without Soren? You know, because he's just gonna blow up those units, one round them, whereas like your other units don't even two round them. You know, like that's really valuable. And another really important thing, and this is factored into the tier list, is that these sages help you skip a chapter that gives you the best staff in the game, the Astra staff. And when paired with a hammer, like, oh my god, you know, you get 2, 4, 6, 9 uses of the Astra staff if you use the hammer on it completely, although I wouldn't do that. 9 uses of Astra staff, which if you don't know what Astra staff does, it heals all your units wherever they are and restores their state, like their status. So if they're slept staff or berserked or whatever, like, well, I don't think there's berserk staffs in this game, but if they're put under sleep, like now they're awake, and that's actually really important for a few chapters. The Astra staff comes into play chapter 20. Let's go back a little bit. Chapter 24, chapter 21, or chapter 21, chapter 24, chapter 26, chapter endgame, right? Like that's where Astra staff is like really valuable. Because there's sleep staves and there's things you have to worry about, right? And then another use, and this is kind of like the nail in the coffin of why I have them both in A tier, is because of what they can do in endgame. So it's something new I did my last run, which is hammering the bolting in endgame. And you can just start teeing off on the dragons. And those dragons are a huge problem in endgame. Like, you know, they can really kill Ike. They can really make your life hard. They stall you out. If Asher comes out and you're not ready, it's just a reset, right? Whereas the bolting, you know, if you keep like hammering the bolting and you're just using Soren, and like his speed and adept will make him so he's actually able to double with the bolting a lot of units. Like it's just absurd. And he ends up being like your most valuable non-Ike, I mean, I guess there's some other valuable combat units on endgame, but it becomes insanely valuable what he's able to do with that bolting. Same with Ileana, of course. So everything I said applies to Ileana, of course. It's just that Soren does a little better because he does come with that adept scroll, and he does have higher skill and higher magic by a little bit. It's just that Ileana has higher strength, so she can actually use some tomes a little bit better than him. It doesn't get weighed down, so their speed ends up being like effectively the same. But they're very similar. And now, we didn't even talk about the basic stuff like the availability. You get Soren super early, you get him chapter 4, so it's very easy to use him. Like, yes, you have to invest in him, but it's not hard to invest in him. You're not really taking away, because you're kind of just, like, using him when you need to use him, chipping away, and, like, generally you're going to be master sealing him before he's level 20. You're not going to be, like, waiting for him to end up promoting. So, he's not that hard to use. Although, I will say that once you first get him, he is kind of hard to use. Like, he is kind of annoying for, like, 2 or 3 chapters. And then, you know, let's talk about Ileana. Ileana, again, she's just below Soren, but let's only talk about really one thing, which is that you get her chapter 8, so slightly less availability, but she comes at like level 6 or 7, and Soren's usually around the same level as her when you get her, so there's really no difference in that. You'll get them about the same skill level once you get a level. They'll be around the same, so it's kind of just pick your poison. But I would say Soren's better. Soren also has the support with Ike and Stefan. So if you're doing siege tomes, like, I guess he'll be slightly more reliable when killing bosses. But it's not the most insane factor. And one thing I do want to mention, by the way, I already mentioned Tormod, but, both these units are S tier if you're using quick glitched Forge Tomes. Like, they're obviously S tier in that case. But we're just talking about, normal usage of these units. So, okay. So that's the last A tier unit. We're finally into the S tier, and I am getting a little tired. There's a long video. I'm sort of slurring words. Sorry about that. So, all right. First unit in S tier is Tanith. So I think a lot of people put Racing above Tanith. I keep saying that. I need to look at it some other tier lists, but Tanith is just insane in Maniac mode. Like, I don't know how you get through this game in Maniac mode without Tanith. Like, Tanith is so important. So important. Every chapter, once you recruit her in chapter 18, or recruiter, she just joins you, she has insane impact. There's not a single chapter where impact isn't felt. There's not a single chapter where you shouldn't be deploying her. And if you got her even like 5 chapters early, imagine you get Tanith like chapter 13. Imagine that. Imagine she'd definitely be the best unit in the game. She just, you don't feel like she breaks the game, but like if you go and play Maniac mode without her, you're like, holy shit, you actually are dependent on Tanith. Like, she is so important for most strategies when it comes to consistently getting through an Iron Man or just even playing the game. Like, I'll go through each chapter because I think it's worth it on the S tier, but, she kind of defines the opening for every single chapter. So, chapter 18, I mean, her opening isn't that important. Actually, no, what am I saying? It is important because you bait out all the Siege Tomes. Chapter 18 is Siege Tome Hell, and you have all these partner units, and those partner units are able to, like, sort of take on the aggro, and that's really helpful because they have a lot of boltings on that map. It's just, the Siege Tomes are insane. So the partner units are really important in chapter 18. Chapter 19, if you're going to get Naesala with Janaff or Ulki, in general, you just want to use these partner units because the Wyverns are going to be able to attack them, the Ballista's going to attack them, and if you don't use the, partner units, Janaff or some of your units are going to die, right? Like, it's going to be really difficult to keep them alive. Again, the partner units are just so invaluable. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't remember, you get to spawn 3, a Falcon Knight and 2 Falcon Riders or whatever, or what are called, Pegasus Knights, and you get to do it twice. So you get 6 partner units that you get to command. Chapter 20, again, Siege Tomes, you get to bait out. Not as important, chapter 20. Chapter 21, insanely important to use Tanith because the Sleep Staff, Siege Tomes, again, you get to bait out. 22, important in case things fail, you don't kill the boss turn 1. 23 is probably the least important, I'd say, yeah. 24, insanely important, of course. 25, insanely important. 26, getting through Clash without the partner units, I don't even know. Like, you really need them. In fact, on chapter 26, I double reinforce. I use Raisin on Tanith, turn 1. Do I do that anymore? I don't remember if I do that anymore, but, it's like, I'm very meticulous of how I use those partner units on Clash, and if you don't use them, like, oh my god, I don't know. Chapter 27, super important. Like, that intro, you're just in that corner. If you don't have those partner units, I don't know. It's just really difficult. 28, really important as well. More Siege Tomes, more Sleep Staffs. And that endgame, like, you need Tanith. Like, you need to send those partner units to the right side to stall. Like, it's just so important. So, yeah. That's like all the chapters where her partner units are important, which is all of her chapters. So, like, she's basically null on crack. If you think Summoners are good in Sacred Stones, which they are, and they're better in some ways, Tanith is just absurd. And on top of that, her player face combat is also great. She comes with, like, good weapon rank. She comes with that, wind sword or whatever. She also has the best support affinity. Like, on top of all these things, or her absurd game-breaking ability, she also has the best support affinity. She comes to level 10 Falcon Knight. She's great player phase, and she can support with Oscar. Now, you're obviously not going to use a support Oscar Tanith, because then you lose Ike Oscar support, even Ike or Oscar Kieran support. Sorry, my throat is killing me right now. So you're not going to use Oscar's Tanith A support or anything like that, but even a B support with Oscar is, like, really good. And it does come into handy on endgame, because on endgame, like, you know, Ike's going to most likely be on his own, because Oscar's going to be a liability. You want to kill everything with Ragnall. So that's when, like, you know, having Oscar and Tanith near each other is, like, really nice, because now they're going to be dodging a lot of things together. So there is untapped potential there as well when you think about it. Like, there is a way to use Tanith and Oscar. But even without her combat, she's S tier. So it's just kind of like the cherry on top, but it's actually really useful. Like, she, you know, I didn't bring it up, I guess, but like her player face combat is really important because of that wind sword and her weapon rank. She deals with the hardest enemies in the game, which are the wyverns and the most common like reinforcement type. So the fact that she can deal with those really easily and handily compared to your other units is like, yeah, just another great thing about her. So she's S tier, not the best unit in the game, but she's game breaking, she's great. Okay, so there's only 3 units left. And I'm just going to lay them out right now because they're all very close together that I could put them in any order. I've kind of flip-flopped through the order with the order throughout time. I still don't know which one's technically best. It's really hard. And I could probably go on for hours comparing and contrasting the 3 units to figure out who is actually the best, who's actually the most valuable. They're basically all tied. I don't know how to say it, but they're all very close. So there's Ike, there's Oscar, there's Titania. I don't know which one's best. I don't know which one's worst. It's really difficult. But I think, you know, to be safe, I mean, most opinions would not have Ike even this high when it comes to this stuff, but like, I'm still gonna put him 3rd for now, but he could be 1st, he could be 2nd, he could be 3rd. Consider these guys like basically all tied, okay? But if I'm gonna be a gun to my head, have to make an order, it'll be Ike, then Oscar, then Titania. So, and Ike is somehow one of the most underrated units in the game. I don't know. I think there's like just some contrarian narratives that have led people to working against the Ike OP sentiment from like when the game first came out. But that's, you know, that's silly. He is OP in Maniac mode. Like, he is OP. He is insane because his combat is like the most consistent and, you know, the best combat in the game for the most part. You know, Ether has around a 25% chance of proccing every attack late game. You know, that means on average Ike is soul lunaing every 2 enemies on enemy phase. So his sustain and power is like unmatched because of Ether. You know, Oscar and Makalov and all these paladins, they get soul, so their sustain is the same, but, you know, actually, is it? Because Ike will heal more. But it doesn't even matter. He just does more damage, so he's going to be able to kill things easier. Ike has the best support in the game with Oscar, so they get plus 30 avoid. So Ike will have the highest avoid in the game on average with Oscar support, higher than Oscar. 105.3 at max level and A support. Now, obviously, you know, Oscar will have like 96, right? But, you know, Oscar also gets the advantage of being able to choose his weapon. So, you know, Ike will sometimes be at a weapon triangle disadvantage against wyverns, but it never becomes a factor, really, because he's just so damn strong with Ether, and he's still dodging them all the time. So he just dodges everything. He's the best at killing things, best to stay in the game, is tanky, and when he gets to Ragnall for the last 2 chapters, he just completely carries your team. His only downside is that he doesn't have a mount and he's sword locked. But in chapter 19, you get the Night Ring, which I do think he's the best target for that. Obviously, you know, needing the Night Ring versus just having a mount built in isn't as good, but it's still huge for him. And he is only competing with the Racing, so I do think he has sort of the right to it. So if you're using Ike to his full potential, he'll be the best combat unit in the game, and he'll have Canto. So... And Ike is generally stronger, so now let's compare him to Oscar. Like, he's generally stronger than Oscar until chapter 10 or 11. Early game, like, because there's a lot of axe users, Oscar just isn't that great until he's, you know, ramping up and getting close to promotion. Ike is always strong early game because he has the Regal Sword. You know, you do have to factor in personal weapons in these games, especially the Lords. Like, personal weapons are a thing that make the unit effectively better. So the fact of the matter is, Ike is intentionally, even if his stats on paper are similar to Oscar's, intentionally made to be better, or not better than Oscar, but intentionally put in position where he does better than Oscar. because there's weapon triangle advantage that he gets in a lot of chapters, and he gets the Regal Sword, which means that he's more effective against some of the tougher units, like the Armor Knights, which Oscar just sometimes does 0 damage to in early game. So Ike is definitely stronger early game than Oscar, but Oscar's stronger for all of mid game until around chapter 20. So, you know, and he's much stronger, right? Like, because he gets to remote. So, you know, until like chapter 20, I'd say like Oscar's stronger because it takes Ike a few chapters to sort of start ramping up and becoming good on his own. And even then, they're probably tied for around 3 of them. So, you know, so Ike is only clearly stronger late game for around like 9 or 8 of those chapters, maybe 10 at best. And Oscar is much stronger for basically all 11 of mid game. And then Ike is way stronger for the last 2 chapters of the game, obviously stronger than everyone. So it's really like a toss-up. Like, I do value endgame a little bit more. You know, Oscar just, I think it does feel like he's better for more of the game than Ike, slightly. And he is slightly more versatile too, because Oscar, you could use Oscar Kieran as your 2 carries and make Ike kind of take a 3rd person role, like a 3rd string role, where he kind of does his own thing. So there's more versatility there with Oscar. And there's the weapon triangle thing as well. But, you know, they do try to make Ike strong the entire game, even on his weak points where he's like level 20 and sword locked. Like, they do give him weapons on purpose, like sword weapons. You know, he gets a Regal Sword, there's Lagoose Slayer, which I guess you can give to Zihark, but, you know, Armor Slayer's like the only map where he feels weak, along with everyone besides Titania, Gotri, Shinon, is like chapter 2, chapter 4, chapter 5. Those are the only maps where he feels weak. And even chapter 5 is debatable. It doesn't feel that weak, but, you know, he's just kind of a, you know, he just gets hit. He doesn't really do anything. Every other map, he is solid, reliable, like self-sufficient. And he'll almost always be better than Oscar Boyd on chapter 1, always. Chapter 5, chapter 6, chapter 7, chapter 8, chapter 9. Like, he'll pretty much always be better than the other Guild mercenaries in those chapters. And then, you know, I still haven't really gone into what makes the avoid so important. Like, the strategy, when you have Ike and Oscar plus 30 avoid with Earth support, okay, with that 105 avoid, the game turns into Ike and Oscar within 3 spaces of each other for all of late game, and they just kill everyone. Like, you break the game. You break the game with them. Most units, enemy units, will have 0% hit on them. Like, Clash, the reason Clash is hard is because your weapon durability goes down. You know, it's not really hard because, you know, Ike and Oscar are at risk of dying. They can die, but it's very rare. The real risk of Ike and Oscar is that they're going to run out of weapons, and now you're not going to have time to get to the boss before, you know, reinforcements come and attack your other units. Things like that. That's the main reason. So they become so broken with that of dodge tanking, where they get hit by nothing. Nothing can hit them. Nothing can kill them. Whereas every other unit on their own is like in a fight for their life with even just 1 or 2 units. You know, it's just absurd, the difference of Ike Oscar versus every other unit on your team. So, you know, if you're playing this game and you don't do supports, please try Ike Oscar A support and just use them in a Maniac mode and realize how powerful it is and how much easier the game has just become. It's like, it trivializes the game. More so than anything else. Again, the closest thing, you know, there's Makalov, Astrid, there's Zihark, Braum, there's Kieran and Oscar, you know, but again, Oscar Ike is just the best. It's just the best of all those things. So they are the best superstar duo in the game. Oh, and I should also mention that even if they do get hit, they both have the best scrolls in the game where they can heal themselves. So, you know, they don't get hit, and even if they do get hit, they're going to heal themselves before it becomes a thing that, like, becomes an issue. So let's talk about Oscar a little bit. So, you know, we already kind of talked about him, but, you know, just like Ike, perfect availability in the entire game. There's like 1 chapter or 2 chapters you don't get him. Is it 1 or 2? 2 chapters you don't get him. But that's not really a factor. And yeah, he's just a mid-game demon. He'll be your best unit. So not just better than Ike, he'll be your best unit for the most part mid-game, and kind of carry our units through. He can, I mean, he is less reliable when it comes to stat growth than Ike. So sometimes he'll have like really low defense or something will be low and you're like pretty annoyed with it. But again, with the plus 30 avoid, does it really matter? Like, he's not getting hit. My last run with Oscar, he had 18 defense at level 20. promoted. That's super low. It just didn't really matter, because he's just dodging everything. It mattered endgame because now he's, able to get killed, but it didn't matter that much. And again, he has Soul and Kanto, so he has that over Ike. So he's just an amazing unit all around, as long as you give him support bonuses. And he does have versatility more than Ike, where he can support with Kieran, I guess Tanith, but I don't really think that's really a viable option. But there is the path of going Kieran Oscar support and doing Ike Titania support, which, I've kind of talked about both Ike and Oscar enough here. Let's talk about Titania a bit. So I am putting Titania at number 1. So, this is debatable because the truth is even though Titania is clearly the superstar of the early game is a fraction of the game, and it's like much less than the late game. It's much quicker to get through. However, she's not just Seth in this. Like, think about Seth in Sacred Stones, where he's like clearly your best unit early game. That's amazing, right? But you don't actually even need to use Seth, right? You can put Seth to the side and use Erica, Franz, Gillum, whoever, and then whomever. You can use whomever, and you're perfectly fine. Titania, you must use early game. That is a difference between Ike and Oscar being super strong late game, although they are bordering must use. Titania is 100% must use early game. If you don't use her, you will not be able to get through it. So that's why, in my opinion, I think Titania might be better than Seth overall, because you don't need Seth early game. He's just busted and overkills. You actually need Titania. You have a dependency on Titania. You would literally be stuck without her. I guess you can get lucky enough where that's not true, but you know what I'm saying. And even though she isn't like a superstar unit late game, there are only like 4 or 5 of those anyways. Like, she'll always have utility. She'll still be fine very late game. The very end, like, I still deploy her usually on end game. Because she still has Kanto, she still does decent damage, even if you haven't been investing in her. And she can still get Soul, still great weapon rank, right? Like, and another thing I haven't talked about is that she does have a support with Ike. So, I've kind of left it up to here, but if you're going to do Kieran Oscar support, you should probably do Ike Titania support. Because then they'll both get plus 15 avoid. And if you invest in Titania, I mean, yeah, she'll be a little bit behind like the Maklov, Kieran, and Oscars of the world, but not that far. And at least with her, you'll never get such a bad Titania that she's not, able to be used. Whereas you could get really unlucky with those other paladins because you get them a lot earlier. Maybe it's a lot unrealistic, but she'll be pretty consistent. So she does have super liking potential. I could see a world where her and Ike and Oscar Kieran end up being both superstar pairings, and now you get to invest in other units and opens up a whole other flurry of possibilities to make this game even easier on Maniac mode. So that's just her weaknesses, addressing her weaknesses, which is that her late game potential is less than the other paladins. Let's talk about her absurd strengths. So, like Chapter 1, you need her, get that Seraph robe. So she already gives you a Seraph robe. I'd say you might need her to kill the bandits. Like, I don't think Ike, Oscar, and Boyd can consistently do it on their own. I don't know if there's enough vulneraries to survive the onslaught. There might be. Chapter 2, you definitely need her. Your real mercenaries are just huddled in a corner waiting for her. She just wipes out everyone for you. Chapter 3, I would say you don't necessarily need her Chapter 3 if you just wait. Behind that, there's like an invisible line where Marcia comes out. But most people do need her if you play it straight up without any prior knowledge. Chapter 4, you definitely need her. 100% need her Chapter 4. Chapter 5, you 100% need her Chapter 5. Chapter 6, you 100% need her. Chapter 7, you 100%. Oh my god. Chapter 7 without Titania, I don't even know how you do it. Like, because she even struggles a little bit on Chapter 7, but that map is so hard if you're not using Titania. It's just, I don't know how you get through on Maniac mode. Chapter 8, you obviously need her. Chapter 9, you need her. It just goes on. Chapter 10, you need her. Chapter 11, you need her. Chapter 12, you need her. Chapter 13, you need her. Sorry, I'm going to keep doing this. Chapter 14, you don't necessarily need her. Chapter 15, you don't necessarily need her. Chapter 16, you don't necessarily need her, but she's still, one of your best units. Chapter 17, you pretty much need her. And then Chapter 18 is when you don't need her anymore, but you probably still are going to be using her. So you need her for all of early game, basically all of mid game, or most of mid game. And then she's still an amazing unit for almost all the game until maybe like chapter 24 onwards, where if you haven't been investing in her, she doesn't have any good supports, yeah, she's going to fall off a little bit and be more of a player phase unit. But by that point, I think she just has more value than Oscar and Ike. I don't know. It's hard to say. So, yeah. Absurd unit. Absurd unit. So, okay. That's tier list. Unfortunately, the fact that I went from bottom to top means that the most important units, I was really tired while discussing. So, you know, it is what it is. But, you know, hopefully you learned something from this. If you disagree with my rankings, that's fine. Go ahead and comment. I may make some videos on specific units like Boyd, Zihark, Marcia, you know, because they're kind of the specific controversial takes that, you know, I kind of want to dive deeper into. But yeah, thanks for watching, and yeah, have a good one.